Moderator Rosie Frew, number 56. I presented the first report of the Faith Nurture Forum in 2020 to an empty room and a camera. Today, I present our final report. The last 4 years have seen massive changes in life and work as a consequence of the pandemic, massive changes in church life and work, not just as a consequence of the pandemic, but of presbytery restructuring and presbytery mission planning. From the beginning, I've likened the journey the Forum has been on to that of a caterpillar transforming to a butterfly. And it's a metaphor that's just as fitting for the church in these times. We're currently going through the chrysalis stage. Now, while some people think of the protective casing of a cocoon or a chrysalis as a resting place, it's anything but. There's a lot of activity going on inside as the old caterpillar body is broken down into a kind of gloopy caterpillar soup before being turned into something new, transformed into a butterfly in all its beauty. When I became convener, the issues that were being raised were far too many vacancies, far too many unsuitable buildings, presbytery struggling to find interim moderators, not enough locums, ministers feeling overburdened. In my report to the General Assembly of 2021, I said that we were draining the resources of our church, people, morale, finance, just to keep a broken system going. It was that year that we brought the Presbytery Mission Plan Act to the Assembly. We asked much, and we promised much, and we did not fully appreciate at that time the impact this immense piece of work would have on the church, on every member and every minister of the church. We asked much, we promised much, and we have delivered. Let me give a bit of context. The Assembly trustees have reported that 40 to 50% of our ministers will retire in the next 10 years. Through recruitment and admission, we welcome between 20 and 30 new ministers each year. We currently have, or at April payroll, we had 596 parish ministers in a charge, which included 2 deaf ministry posts, 7 transition or interim ministers. That's down 57 on last year. As of January 2023, there were 121 ministers over 65 and a further 168 over 60. We have 32 serving as assistant ministers, 117 ministries development staff, that's 89 full-time equivalent. Of the 41 presbyteries listed at the beginning of the mission planning process in 2021, 30 mission plans have been agreed and are now being implemented. 3 plans are being resubmitted, most likely in June. 2 presbyteries are receiving assistance. 3 who are now 1 presbytery, their plan is hopefully being submitted in August. 3 small presbyteries had plans voted down locally, and these are being reconsidered. We owe immense gratitude, firstly, to Karen Campbell and the Presbytery Mission Plan Implementation Group, a group comprised of ministers and members. Not them, but us, who, along with the General Trustees, have journeyed alongside all our presbyteries over the past 2 years, and who have considered each plan prayerfully and carefully before submitting to the Faith Nurture Forum for final approval. Immense gratitude To all those who have engaged prayerfully and realistically and imaginatively, accepting that the hardest of decisions have had to be made, that so much is changing, that so much is being asked of them, and that the future will be very different, but who have not hidden their heads in the sand. Immense gratitude to those who have been in training for ministry and in familiarisation during this most unsettling time, and whose call to a charge has been put on hold as a consequence of the planning process, but who are serving the church in a host of different ways across our presbyteries. And can I urge the presbyteries to continue to tend what has been planted and nurtured, and the green shoots of growth. Already the church is changing, and the future will be very different. In 2019, the Forum was tasked with the development of 100 new worshipping communities. Congregations now report 400 new worshipping communities in some stage of development, including Messy Church, Cafe Church, and online worship. The Pioneer Scotland network has grown to 300 members, and last year, the online ministry Sanctuary First was brought within the national church. We need to ensure that the church continues to be properly resourced. You heard yesterday of the financial support which will be available through the Seeds for Growth Fund. Those in our mission development team help train, encourage and resource congregations in both English and Gaelic for leading worship, for ministry and mission to children, families, young people and young adults, for intergenerational church, for pioneering and new worshipping communities, for school chaplaincies, for supporting and learning from those working in our priority areas. At this point and on your behalf, can I commend the priority areas team and the priority areas churches for their commitment in the face of COVID and the cost of living crisis to serving and speaking out for the poorest in our land. And commend also a series of articles on intergenerational church in Life and Work over recent months. Let me highlight one resource. Acorn seeks to connect Christians with the work God is doing in others through caring conversation. The acronym ACORN describes the how. Ask, call, obey, report, notice. You can find out about how your congregation could engage with Acorn this lunchtime in the Augustine Church, 41 George IV Bridge, or this evening at 7:30 in St Nicholas Parish Church in Sighthill Lone. We are delighted to welcome 2 new members of staff, Very Reverend Dr. Martin Fair and Reverend Eleanor McMahon, who have been called to serve the church in a new way and to bring a wealth of experience to our people and training team, headed up by Kay Cathcart. Their remit is to envision, resource and support the development of local leadership, to ensure our recruitment criteria, processes and experiences are fit for purpose for the church of tomorrow, and to develop a culture of lifelong learning within the church, positioning the required training at the best time in the most helpful way. Church of Scotland Learning will launch in August, offering a wide range of materials to be accessed by individuals, local congregations and presbyteries in the areas of sharing faith, theological reflection, discipleship, violence against women, and equality, diversity and inclusion. In response to last year's deliverance, there will also be materials for congregations and those in ministry to learn more about the confessional position of the Church and the vows office holders make. A leadership course, modules for elders and pastoral carers, further discipleship materials, and equipping for funeral ministry are in the development stages, with many currently being piloted. We've entered into a refreshed 5-year partnership with Place for Hope, initiating a suite of training called Living Peace. This programme provides opportunities that will help a presbytery, congregation, or those in ministry to proactively invest in healthy and honest relationships, aiming to prevent damaging conflict wherever possible. The Ascend website and your presbytery will carry more information about the programme. Following the approval of our vision statement at last year's General Assembly, the Forum identified as a priority the development of an apprenticeship training route. This could extend access to all our recognised ministries, an opportunity to work for the Church, to utilise skills and life experience alongside studying and being supported by training. Our academic providers are keen to explore possibilities. I want to take this opportunity to thank all those involved in discernment and selection, in training and formation of our readers, ministers and deacons, who give so much of themselves and their faith and their experience in these invaluable roles. I'm very conscious that we ask a lot of those in the recognised ministries. Ascend is the branding for the wide range of materials, courses and support options that are available to those in ministry. So can I urge my colleagues to take the time to read the monthly email or access the website to keep up to date and to engage. Lifelong learning is so important. Looking after ourselves and one another is imperative. Alongside our study leave provision, Section 11 of our deliverance asks that you note the introduction from the 1st of January 2024 of an integrated support allowance of £250 per year for those in full-time ministry. There's also £250 a year available to fund a retreat. Over these past 4 years as convener, I've observed the work done by our support team and the pastoral care shown to those in ministry going through the hardest and most challenging of times. It's all confidential, so we don't speak of it. But before I go, I want to blow the trumpet and show my appreciation. And ministers, please, could you look out the email we sent you just a few weeks ago? And if you haven't done it yet, make a will, fill in the expression of wish forms. I know none of us likes to think of these things, but from my experience as a death in service trustee, they are so important. I'm going to finish with a confession. In lockdown, when we were all binge-watching box sets, I got addicted to a series called New Amsterdam. Dr. Max Goodwin, the new medical director of New Amsterdam Hospital, disrupts the status quo and proves he will stop at nothing to breathe new life into this understaffed, underfunded and underappreciated hospital. 5 series later, the final episode begins with Max talking to a staff meeting about what made him want to be a doctor. The spark of an early experience, his call, his vocation, his driving force. And throughout the episode, his colleagues reflected on their particular paths to medicine, re-engaging with that passion, that ambition. So much in that episode chimed with me about our church situation and our feelings. When we're feeling understaffed, underfunded, underappreciated, think back. Remember that coming to faith, that call to Christian service, that call to ministry. What it was that engaged us, opened our eyes and our hearts. Why we do what we do. The God we love, the Saviour we follow, the Spirit who infills and enables us. Speaking personally, I remember and give thanks for a newspaper article written way back in 1976 about a married couple being licensed for ministry and realizing for the first time as a 14-year-old girl that a woman could be a minister. I remember the thrill and the excitement of these first stirrings of call, and the terror as well, but thrill and excitement that still fill me today. So if you're feeling the first stirrings of call by God and want to explore what it is that God is calling you to, look out for someone wearing one of these badges, a coffee, a chat, and a calling, and take them up on that offer of coffee. Finally, I'd like to thank the members of the Forum for their support, encouragement, and friendship over the past 4 years. And on their behalf, thank the amazing staff we've worked alongside at 121. Also, a big thank you to our families for their support and forbearance over these years, which has been much valued. And I can now literally hand on the baton I received from Neil Glover to Tommy McNeil, the new convener of the Faith Action Programme leadership team, and all the members of it and the programme groups taking forward the work of the forums. I have it. Tommy's not here, so I'm going to give it to Scott to pass on, but this is literally the baton that gets passed on. And I'm going to end with a bit of blatant advertising. You can keep up to date with the Faith Action Programme in the new stylised form of Life and Work. Moderator, I present the report. I also present you with a T-shirt in green, a coffee, a chat, and a challenge. And I move the deliverance. Thank you very much. Good. It's a bit big, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, convener. Questions to the convener? I've got a pretty good list, so we will start. We have Linda Watt, Alistair Walker, and Patricia Whitaker. So if we could start with those three. Linda, Alistair, Patricia. Linda.
Linda Watt, 205. I'm really sorry. I must have pressed the wrong button. I don't have a question.
That's fine. Thank you. It's all right. Alistair, please.
Likewise, I don't have a question, moderator. I simply recorded applause at the end of the last speaker, but maybe that's been interpreted as a question, but it wasn't a question.
That is all right. There's a Q in front of your name on my screen. That's why I'm going with that. We're going to give this third time lucky. Let's see. Robert Smith, do you have a question?
It was just a comment on the deliverance as a whole.
Okay, we're not there yet. So, perfect. Point of order is always in order.
61. McInnes 184. Point of order is based on the legality of the advice given re the building classification. The Presbytery Plan Act gave very clear directions as to what A and B meant. But we were then advised that buildings that had been classified as B star, as we had, were to be. Are you going to stop me, or am I okay to talk about this? It's to do with competence of the whole part of the Presbytery Plan. I'm asking for this question.
This is a point of order.
It's not a
I don't
point
think
of
that's a
order.
point of order.
Sorry, sir, it's not a point of order, but if you come and speak to us and we'll help you find the right bit for you to raise your point. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, I'm going to abandon this screen in a moment, but we're going to give it one last shot. We have Robert Smith and Roderick Hamilton, and then Sandy Horsburgh. So if we have a question, that's great. If it's not a question, we'll move to the next one. But I will come to you. It's Roderick Hamilton. So we've got Roddy.
Yes.
Is it a question, Roddy?
Moderator, it is a question.
Yes!
Yay.
Wonderful.
I can go and sit down now. But moderator, thank you to the convener for her report. Though I have to say, I'm finding it a wee bit hard to recognise the almost upbeat nature of this report about presbytery planning. There's no words to me about the consequences on the well-being and the mental health of those ministers who, like me, and maybe it is only me, who is lying in their bed at 3 o'clock in the morning worrying about all of this. It's been mentioned on the floor, but nothing formal that recognises what this has been like. I don't know the statistics, but I've heard from a number of sources that up to a third of the ministers of the church are off sick. Now, I don't know if that's true. That's an awful lot to me. Some of that will be local staff, and a lot will be stress from all of this. I don't know, but I'd like to know what the actual number is. And I think the convener would like to know as well. Strikes me any large organisation like the church, if they were undertaking something as big as this presbytery planning, they would realise the stress levels of their workers would go way through the roof and would mitigate for that. I know of at least half a dozen of my colleagues who have demitted over the last 12 months, not to go to another job, just to get out the church, because they'd be even more ill if they stayed. And I don't know how many thereafter are just hanging on. Can the convener tell us the proportion of ministers who are off at the moment, and also how many have demitted in the last 12 months? And then I suggest we maybe mirror that number at least to those who are just about holding on. An awful lot of our planning has been bureaucratic rather than missional. And the whole thing lacks something human, perhaps, because we don't say how we feel. Well, I want the Assembly to know how presbytery planning has made me feel, becoming restless and quite cynical about the whole thing, and quite often numb about all the discussions. And I've spoken to so many who feel the same way. The planning process has had a major well-being consequence on my colleagues, and my question is one way to recognise what the report doesn't.
Thank you. Convener.
Moderator, we do not... Presbytery planning, it has been the hardest of things, and we recognise that. And we know that for many of our ministers, most of our ministers, it has been incredibly stressful. However, at the moment, I can say that there are 4% of our ministers who are off sick. We fluctuate between 4 and 6%. That's just over the years. That is where we are. Of these, 14% of that 4% are off with what has been described as work-related stress. Now, a point was raised yesterday that we are living in incredibly stressful times. It's not just presbytery mission planning. There are many, many stresses upon us and upon everyone in our land at this time. There's an awful lot that's anecdotal, But these are the figures. Now, I'm sure many of you, most of us, are feeling stressed by things, whether it's presbytery, mission planning, whether it's life in the parish, whatever. We have a range of support services through Ascend, and I would encourage you to make use of these. That would be the first. Speaking also to our support services, many of the causes of stress are relational. Breakdown of relationship. People not being kind or considerate or respectful to one another. So there's a lot that we could do to make a hard situation, and I'm not denying that this is the hardest of situations, but we can all be careful with the language that we use and how we treat other people as we go through this time together. I hope these statistics help you understand it's not the anecdotal that you have suggested. In terms of the number who've demitted, 37? 37 ministers have demitted in the past year for a range of different reasons. Many of them, yes, their current situation was maybe not one they wanted to remain in. It doesn't mean they'll not go back to ministry. It doesn't mean they may do something different in ministry in the future. But we also have 121 who are still in ministry over the age of 65. It's a very strange picture that I'm painting, and I recognise that.
Thank you, Convener. We have Alexander Horsburgh. I have Emma Carmichael as well. We'll go with those two. Sandy.
Thank you, Moderator. Sandy Horsburgh, number 61. Mr. Hamilton asked nearly all of my questions, so I'll not repeat it. But I just wonder if the convener would agree with me that while the Ascend programme offers many excellent resources to support ministers cope with the stress of ministry, what the Church and its ministers maybe actually needs is for our health and our well-being, is for the causes of stress to be tackled. And to paraphrase the late Desmond Tutu, it's not enough just to pull people out of the river. We have to go upstream and find out why they're falling in the first place.
Okay. Convener, thank you.
Moderator. There is no simple answer to why folk are falling in the river. Perhaps it's because we're paying the price for failing to make hard decisions in the past. Perhaps because our words and actions don't always show kindness and compassion as they should. And we all need to take responsibility for how we continue to help and support one another for the journey that we make together. But it's never just one thing. I was speaking to a colleague yesterday who mentioned a mutual friend and said that person was currently off work, but the causes of them being off work were many. And it wasn't simply presbytery mission planning. There were a whole host of other stresses that together, it's the cumulative effect. And that is why many people are feeling so stressed. Again, I'll refer back to the speaker yesterday. We are living in this stress pandemic, a cost of living crisis, a war. We've just come out of COVID. Life is really hard for everyone in our country. It's really stressful for everyone. And we've just got presbytery mission planning thrown in on top.
Thank you, Convener. With Emma Carmichael. It's microphone 83. Thank you, Emma.
Thank you, Moderator. I do have a comment, not a question. So is that all right now? Or?
We'll hold that comment. We'll hold that comment, but I will come back to you. Okay, just so we're clear, because we are at questions, the folk I have on my screen with a Q in front of their names, Robert Smith, Kevin Brewer, Robert Allen, and Gillian Richmond. Is there anyone else who has a question? If you can get the question mark at the end reasonably quickly, that would be great. Thank you. Great.
Yes, moderator Robert Smith, 397. Let me just begin with some words you said this morning. Tick tock, tick tock. I think we're all very aware of the demands on our time and the stresses, as previous speakers have mentioned. I'm very, very appreciative of the support that we receive from the forum, from One2One, from colleagues, for those of us who, for various reasons, have hit that wall and have needed help getting back up. I'm also aware that oftentimes those mechanisms that we have in place are after the fact, after we've hit that wall and entered that dark space. And I guess my question is, can we somehow, with these team ministries that we're entering into, can we somehow build in some rest? And it sounds counterintuitive. All these things on our plate, there's so many, but we need to somehow step back and rest. The model of Jesus Christ was exactly that. He engaged in intense times of ministry, but he took time to rest. And I feel if we miss that, we're missing something really, really important. And so my question is, can we do that, please? Can we build in deliberately and consistently periods of rest beyond the 7 Sundays you get off out of 52 in a year, to rest, to recharge, and to come back revitalized to do the incredibly important work that we've all been called to do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No, thank you, convener. Thank you.
When I was a brand new minister, we were always encouraged to look after ourselves so we could look after others. And that caring for ourselves, that taking the 2 days leave recommended, 2 days off per week recommended, our study leave, the possibility of retreat. In part, it's about our time management and our looking after ourselves and our ability to say no and our ability to prioritize and sometimes say, do you know, especially as we're moving into bigger parishes, as we're taking on more responsibilities, it's that discussion with our congregation, with our Kirk session about, okay, so what are our priorities going forward? Because we cannot do everything that we did in the past. We can't just add 1 and 1 together, make 2 and say, well, we do all of that. We can't. So we have to be very proactive about looking after ourselves and looking after each other. About elders' Kirk sessions looking after their minister, looking out for their minister and making sure they're taking time off, making sure they're taking their holidays, encouraging them to make use of study leave and retreat time. Be proactive about engaging with Ascend and all the possibilities there, whether it's a ministerial discussion conversation, whether it's coaching, whether it's the events that Ascend put on. But please make use of it.
Thank you. We are going to, because questions are always in order and we need to probably begin to move through the sections of deliverance, I'm going to take one more question here, but your questions are always in order. So I'm going to take your question.
Me?
Yes, thank you.
Gillian Richmond, 105. I was ordained last September into one of the assistant minister jobs, and I signed a contract for a maximum of 18 months. It's been absolutely wonderful, and I've already almost reached the 9-month mark. It's been great. My question is, I note that you're going to continue to offer support to those finishing training, and until the presbytery, the calling process is running smoothly. I'm wondering, I'm aware that I've only got 9 months left in my place. I'm wondering if we could have a little bit of clarity as to what the vacancy process running smoothly means, because I would quite like to have some security and knowledge as to what's going to happen.
Thank you, Gillian.
So 30 presbyteries have plans approved, and so presbyteries can start calling. Now, I know there are quite a lot of adjustments to be made, things to be done, but things are starting to move, and I would just encourage, please, as quickly as possible. We need to get things moving again. I can assure you that until everything is running more smoothly and you are called to a charge, there will be financial support. There is a letter supposed to be coming out. I think we'd hoped to get it out before the Assembly, but it got lost in all the preparations, so sorry for that.
Yeah, just check, okay. Thank you, convener. We are going to move through the sections of deliverance. I have several folk on my screen who would like to speak to receive the report. So we have Ian Young, Patricia Whitaker, and Gillian Richmond, who would like to speak to section 1, receive the report. Is that correct? If it is, you can get up and come to the microphone, and if it isn't, we'll keep moving once we've...
Do it twice.
That's quite all right. We all make mistakes. Not a problem. It's number 7. And it's Mary Whitaker. Why do I keep... Well, it's Patricia on here. But it's Mary Whitaker. Oh, it's your middle name. Okay. Then we don't have anybody else who would like to speak to section 1. So section 1, receive the report. Thank you. And online? Okay, thank you. Section 2. Who wants to speak to section 1?
53.
What? Wasn't there? Okay, Ian Young.
Yeah, sorry, Margaret. Ian Young, 208. I would just like to make a comment, if that's allowed, on section 4.3 of the report.
Could we wait till we get to section 4.
No, there's not a deliverance on it. I was asked by the clerk to speak for it.
Sure.
Okay,
go for it.
Thank you, moderator. It's a comment from October 2022 to March this year. I participated in the discernment process at St George's Tron Church in Glasgow and found it a very useful process. And even though I felt at the end of the placement that God wasn't calling me to sacramental ministry, He was calling me to become a local worship leader in my home church of Gorbals. I hope to begin the course in the autumn and currently part of the worship team and have co-led many services at Gorbals. I would like to thank the recruitment team for the opportunity to explore where God is calling me to serve. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you.
Can I thank you very much for that, and we wish you every blessing on your future and on your training. Thank you.
Thank you. We've got section 2. Now, because this screen is quite muddled at the moment. We are going to go old school temporarily. I tell you, could we hold for 1 minute while we figure out what's happening? Because I want to make sure that nobody is missed, but the screen has gotten a little bit confusing. Back to order, thank you.
If I might take a moment. On the request to speak, whether you're using your own device or on the iPads, if you select that you're making a question or comment on the report as a whole, the system is defaulting to question. So those are for the situations where you're asking a question before we have moved to the deliverance. It is a little confusing as we try to digitize something we've been doing in other ways for a time. If you're wishing to make a comment or a question that relates to a specific deliverance, then you would choose the section of deliverance and you can specify which one. The first section of deliverance to any report will always be receive the report. And that would be the opportunity to ask a general question or make a comment. I hope that clarifies where we're at. We have become a little muddled. We have some questions appearing on the list, and the moderator is suggesting that as we move on, that we take off the questions. I'll read the names in a moment, and then if you're wishing to make a question or a comment to a specific item of the deliverance, that you would then re-register and specify the section of deliverance. Did that make sense? On screen, showing as questions, we have Emma Carmichael, Youth Rep 580, Alex Shuttleworth, 294, Robert Allen, 221, Tim Norwood, Ecumenical Delegate 511, Andrew Gardner, 322, Kevin Brewer, 383. Those have now been removed. If you wish to make a comment or a question on a particular part of the deliverance, when we get to it, please resubmit. Thank you all.
Thank you. And we'll give folk a minute, and thank you for your patience. Okay. Okay. Kevin Brewer on section 2.
Brewer 383. This was the best section because I tried to raise a question or a comment with the receive the report, but it is applicable to this one. And it's really in relation to communicating what is happening, and it's a perennial issue. We mentioned about the Ascend website, which as a minister is excellent in the sense that it brings together, you know where to go to seek information and what's available. And really my question is, could we actually have something similar for congregations where it brings together all the stories, where it brings together the resources, where it brings together links to the funding. There was mention made of the many new resources coming up. So there's one place that we go to and we can find, as congregations, resources and support that we can have. Thank you.
Thank you. Convener, would you like to respond?
One thing that we have been doing for the last year in Life and Work, we've had a 2-page spread to try to highlight some of the work that's been done by the forums. And I know it's only one way. There's a lot of news that I agree with you. There's news everywhere. We've got a lot of news. And if you have a particular interest, there's probably particular ways that you can access different news, whether it's a Facebook page. So, yeah, there is an awful lot. I get that. As I say, we've been putting our news out through Life and Work. It also goes out through the main church website. But the comms team are they'll be listening to this, so they're our communications team. So hopefully they'll be able to do something to help. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I have nothing else on the screen for section 2. So section 2 of the deliverance. And online? Great. Section 3. And online. Thank you. We've got Emma Carmichael for section 4. Thank you for being so patient, Emma.
Number 83. Oh, there we go. Thank you, moderator. It's Emma Carmichael, number 580. I'm here today not only as a youth representative, but also as part of the Young Adult Volunteers Program, or YAV program, which is described in section 2.1.7 of this report. Over the past year, I have served in a priority area congregation in Dundee, supporting mission work and engaging in the local community. During my year of service, my position as a YAV has empowered me to engage in the life of the Church of Scotland. I've been hugely welcomed by my own congregation, as well as given opportunities to engage with the church as a whole. I have been made to feel valued, and I hope that in turn, I have added value to the spaces that I have entered. I believe my experiences illustrate the power of programs specifically dedicated to supporting and uplifting young voices. Therefore, I wanted to take this time to say thank you to all those that have welcomed me in my year here, and to urge this assembly to always consider how best children, young people, and young adults can not only be included, but also celebrated in all aspects of the church. I commend the YAV program for its commitment to do just this, and I encourage all of us to not stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you. Donald Michael McInnes.
McInnes 184. Just following on to the report, I was a chaplain in a school about 10 years ago, and it was during the period of the consultation on same-sex marriage. And the Presbytery of Glasgow decided for its own reasons not to make any submission at all, but I published my own responses to that online. And a parent in the school decided that I had to be cancelled. I got Secular Scotland, and the press camped on my lawn for a whole week, near enough, and all sorts of comments about me in the press and things like that. I'm just wondering if we could maybe think about strengthening that thing about supporting people working in schools, so that people who are faithful to the Church's orthodox position on issues like that are not victimised or attacked or harassed for holding to these ordinary views, which are still, as far as I'm aware, the default position of the Church.
Thank you.
Moderator, if I could just first to answer the YAV question. Just delighted to hear that you've had such a positive experience. I can say that we're expanding the programme. We're also sending 5 of our young people out to PCUSA. Got that right. So we have a reciprocal arrangement, but I'm just delighted that you've been having such a wonderful experience in Scotland, and we are delighted that you have been serving the church here. When it comes to school chaplaincy, Isabel Booth Clibborn is our member of staff who is working in this area, and I think she would be the person to contact, probably in the first instance. I know we have to be careful, our work in schools, and I know in the secondary school where I'm a chaplain, we have a chaplaincy agreement, you know, because we have to be careful what we say in schools, and I think there's sometimes a nervousness, but if Isabel would be the person to contact and see if you can take it from there.
Can I just be clear, it wasn't said in school, it was said in my capacity as a parish minister elsewhere and picked up on.
Okay.
But the Assembly was very clear they didn't want people harassed because they were...
Moderator, I'm sorry to interrupt, but could the participant please use the microphone?
Come to the microphone.
For those online.
Or you could take that up.
Yeah, I just think that we should be ensuring that people aren't discriminated against because of holding biblical views or even unbiblical views if the church permits these views. I think we shouldn't be part of this cancel culture, and I'm just asking that the committee consider protecting people who hold biblical views in an increasingly aggressively secular society. Thank you.
Does the convener, do you want to respond, or are you happy to take that on board?
We've heard the comment, and I'm sure it will be taken on board. Thank you.
Thank you. So, section 4. And online. Thank you. Section 5, Gary Peacock.
Moderator, thank you. Gary Peacock, 104. I wonder if the convener is aware of moves regarding the religious representatives on local authorities. I wonder if she's aware of moves in some Scottish local authorities to move the voting rights of religious reps and education committees. These moves are being promoted by the Humanist Society Scotland, who of course support a wholly secular state. While not getting too defensive on this issue and understanding different points of view, I wonder if the convener knows in the successor body might be in sympathy that this may be seen as perhaps a positive opportunity to work with those of other churches, especially perhaps in this context our brothers and sisters in Christ in the Roman Catholic tradition, and indeed with those of other faith groups who have an interest in education, to make the point that our conversations are richer if there are more and distinct voices at the table, and that those conversations are diminished if those voices are removed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moderator, this isn't really faith nurture work, although the deliverance appears here, but I have been assured that we do prioritise the work we do with local councils and also with schools. So again, we've heard your concerns, we've heard what has been said.
Thank you. Section 5. And online. Wonderful. Section 6. And online. Thank you. We are going to take a well-earned 20-minute circulation break. So go and grab a cup of coffee and relax. And thank you. We'll see you back here in 20 minutes. Call on the convener of the Business Committee to do an update very quickly.
Thank you, Moderator. Can I invite you all to take your mobile phones or anything else that will go bleep and ensure that it is silent? There have been a number of comments about phones and other things. So if you've set an alarm for lunchtime, please see that it's quiet. Can I also assure all participants that, yes, questions are always in order. If you have a question that doesn't relate to a specific item of the deliverance, and you didn't have an opportunity at the beginning when questions are called for, there is also an opportunity at the end when the moderator will say that we're now approving the deliverance as a whole. And the moderator will give an opportunity for questions when we reach that point. Thank you.
We are at section 7. Grant Barkley has question comment. Thank you, Grant.
166 Grant Barkley. On this section of law, I'd like to speak for a moment, Moderator, if I may, about grace. For more than 3 decades, the Reverend Richard Durno, Minister to the deaf community in Glasgow and the west of Scotland, he encouraged me to learn to sign, albeit poorly, so that for a decade I could serve as the chaplain to Kilmarnock Deaf Church. And I see my successor, Dr. Wilson, is there too. He helped Graham as well. I was at the service at John Ross Memorial Church in Glasgow on Sunday, leading worship in Richard's absence, because Richard suddenly and unexpectedly was taken into God's nearer presence last Wednesday. I heard there at the service a great deal of gratitude for his ministry and a real sense of concern that those who are deaf, who desire to gather together to worship God, as they look around, find it increasingly difficult to see who will lead them in the future. And so, not only do I want to pay tribute to the ministry which Richard Durno exercised over all these years, but to say, as you said this morning, moderator, in discerning a call to ministry, if there are any who are commissioners or any commissioners who know others who have the ability to sign or are willing to undertake the challenging task of learning to sign, you're enabling ministers like me who are not very good at doing that to minister as you offer signing as a gift from God to nourish the people of God would be wonderfully well received. I am grateful to the Church of Scotland for supporting deaf ministry, and thought that I should speak at this point because this Act represents, I think, the Church's continuing commitment to our sisters and brothers who operate through signing rather than through oral speech, and hope that as Richard gave his life to serve in that way, there might be others who are able to give their skills and gifts to serve the whole people of God, that all might worship, learn and grow. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Barclay. That was important that we have that moment. Section 7. Oh, excellent. Sorry, I missed you. Apologies, Mary. Is it not on the screen? Okay.
I'm really emotional now. Thank you so much for saying that. That means a lot. So the Act, I just want to firstly say thank you to Darren Golby. Thank you so much for making the amendments and getting this Act put forward, because now the deaf ministry is seeing change, huge change. And through the Act, it's like a really good guideline to move forward. And this is so important. So thank you, Darren. Secondly, I would like to add some terminology. I wanted to say Ministry for Deaf and Deaf-Blind People. Because deaf-blind people use BSL a lot. Many people have come to me and expressed that need, so from wanting this deaf-blind perspective included. So I was really privileged to be at a deaf-blind wedding and marry a deaf-blind couple. There were 11 dogs there. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Convener.
We are very happy to have the Act adjusted, amended. No? Sorry.
It's not quite as straightforward as that. I thought you'd been advised, so I apologise, convener. Thank you, moderator. It's simply because, absolutely, Mary, we hear you. But to just simply add the name into the name of the Act wouldn't work with the provisions of it. But what we will do is absolutely look at that and get that dealt with, so that all the provisions in the legislation support the deaf-blind as well.
Okay. I did get a message. It's just I'm jumping the gun. Yeah, I'm happy to consider. Darren will make sure it's all sorted out for you. So.
Okay. Thank you, and thank you, Mary, for bringing that. Much appreciated. Okay. Section 7. and online. Thank you. Section 8. And I'm going because there's no one on the screen, so we're going to keep going through, and online. And I'm going to take a moment now. We talked about this and thought this would be an opportune moment to stop. This morning in the gallery, we have the Reverend Jean Montgomery with us. Jean. I'd like you to look at this table with women sitting at it. Jean, you are the longest serving female minister in the Church of Scotland, and you just celebrated 50 years of ordination. I know when we were having coffee, you said, yeah, it just happened. But I want to say from the General Assembly and from me and from the heart, we stand on the shoulders of giants and we walk the path of pilgrims. And you are both. So thank you for hearing that call and saying, yeah, I hear you, and it is me, and being brave enough to explore it. Jean also told me while we were having coffee that the General Assembly passed the act allowing women to be candidates for ministry on Wednesday, and her application was mailed on Sunday. So 50 years, and we were not going to let that just slide by. So thank you from the Assembly. Thank you from both the charges that you so wonderfully led. That Kelmer Memorial and for St. Margaret's. Thank you for convening the Board of Ministry when they were going through the stipend discussions. Thank you for serving this church so beautifully, and you continue to do it. So thank you. We move to section 9, and we have several folk asking to speak, so we will start with Alex Shuttleworth, and then Gillian Rooney and John Cook, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Moderator. Alex Shuttleworth, number 294. I was one of those who was lost in the backwash of the technology meltdown earlier today, and this might not be the entirely appropriate place to put this, but since we're back to the presbytery planning area, I think there's something I want to say, and it was something I wanted to say in response to the debate as it opened when the convener was asked why she was basically so chipper and cheery, because we didn't feel very chipper and cheery. And I want to thank the convener for this report, and I want to thank her for her introduction of it, and I wanted to thank her for the manner in which she did introduce it. I want to thank her that she pointed out the positives. And yes, we know the pressures. We all know the pressures. We know the sleepless nights, the 3 o'clock in the morning. I've got them. I've got a parish with a bright, lively congregation in a Category B building. And I bet the convener also has seen some 3 o'clock in the mornings over the past 3 years as well because of the pressures that we've pounded upon her. But thanks to the convener for her tone and approach. Because the question we do not want to have her stand up and answer is, if not this, then what? If not this, then what? So thank you for helping us to see it not through the prism of doubt, danger, and difficulty, but through the prism instead of faith, hope, and love. And that's not whistling in the wind. That is modelling leadership. And that is one of the things which, hard as it may be for some of us to hear, we have not been doing as leaders in the church. We've not been modelling leadership. Our challenge is not to stoke gloom for a regretted past, but to model a bright new tomorrow. We have no right to exist. We have a mission challenge to accept. Now, if we begin to think through the prism of faith, hope, and love, and not with an existential right, but a missional challenge, they're posh words, just to prove I went to university, then I think we're going to end up a lot better than we suspect. That's what I wanted to say, Moderator. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moderator 188. I wish to speak not on the allocation of the posts, but on the nature of these posts. I was ordained and inducted into a parish in December 2021, just before the moratorium on vacancies was put into place. By dint of just a few weeks, I and a few others were able to begin our ministry in a parish that we have a pastoral tie to, and I'm grateful for that. But many of my colleagues that I began training with have not been able to do this. Last year's provisions were made for them, and we've heard about them already. They were ordained, and places for them to minister were found. And this seemed helpful at the time. But as time has passed, there's no clear end in sight in this period of limbo that they find themselves in. And from professionally engaging with these people, I see the commitment that they have to ministry, and yet I see a church that has undervalued them. These ministers are fully trained and are hard at work in situations that many experienced ministers would find challenging, at often a financial disadvantage also. And they're doing this alone, despite the assistant title that they keep being given. I wonder if the convener might indicate what continuing support and opportunities to minister will be offered to them, including the possibility that they might be inducted into charges before charges are allowed to call. There must be something we can do to help.
Okay, so I'm getting several pieces of advice here. So firstly, the commitment to those who are working at the moment as assistant ministers. This is reviewed continually, so very definitely every 6 months, just to take account of the situation that we are in. As I said earlier, we have 30 presbytery plans which have been approved. We have to get a move on. We have people, our assistant ministers, who are looking for their first charges. We have those who are feeling God calling them to something else, who are looking to move. And so it's about positively addressing the situation and trying our hardest to get vacancies advertised as quickly as possible. It is in the hands of the presbyteries.
Thank you. John Cook, Anna Rodmell, and Donald Michael McInnes I have on the list.
Moderator John Cook, 379. I'm grateful to last year's Assembly for setting up a special committee to look at the allocation of ministries to the former Gordon Presbytery, as a former member of that presbytery. And there's we'll hear about that after this report, but within the report there's a reference on page 257, 3.2.7.4, confirming that the ministry's allocation for Gordon Presbytery would be 16.5 posts. However, in the table in Appendix 3, it's down as 16 ministries. Now, I'm sure there's a very good reason for that, which I'm not aware of, and I'd be very pleased to hear it. But in the unlikely event that there's not, please could we have our point 5 ministry back?
Richard Baxter, who convened the committee looking into Gordon Presbytery, assures us that the correct number is 16.
That's not what's in the print.
Can I just say we will look into that? And
Can we set up a special committee, moderator?
That was the special committee.
Can we set up another one?
Can we just take time to look into it, and I will get back to you to try to unravel this. I'm really sorry. It would have been helpful if we'd known beforehand. We could have done a bit of homework, but we will get back to you as soon as possible.
Thank you, Convener.
Make 53, thank you. Anna Rodwell, number 65. I would also like to say thank you. I've been a minister for 25 years, and I want to say it's a privilege and it's a joy. It's not that it's not stressful. Having done 67 funerals last year, on top of everything else a parish minister has to do, it's not an easy job, but for anybody who is watching or anybody who's thinking about a calling, it is the best job in the world. I wanted to say thank you. It's about allocations. I was in Jedburgh Presbytery, and our allocations were a bit upset originally. And there's actually an apology in the report, and I just want to say thank you for that. It takes a big committee to apologise. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. If Donald Michael McInnes, Brian Kerr and Fiona Gardner.
Donald Michael McInnes, 184. The motto of the clan McInnes is McInnes Irish. That means McInnes again. So I hope that might be my last time today. Can I take just a second before I suppose I'm going to speak about, just to put my amen to the question by the Reverend Rooney, who spoke about students. I really do think we need to do something for people who have spent years in training and will be quite impecunious by now, and probably getting very concerned. Because I remember in my own days, at the end of my student days, things were looking pretty grim. But I want to speak about the actual deployment of the ministries. Now, Glasgow Presbytery, I believe, is unique in that it doesn't allow any of its UPA, the priority area allocation, to be allocated to Ministry of Word and Sacrament. Now, I don't know if that suggests a lack of confidence in Ministry of Word and Sacrament, because they are allowing Ministry of Word and Sacrament allocation to be transferred to diaconate and MDS people. Now, some of the reasons for this are to keep people's jobs, because obviously these guys don't have tenure, and I can appreciate that, and it's important that we realise that there's a human cost in all that we're doing. But a consequence could be that a minister who is on reviewable tenure could end up not being able to get a post. I think the methodology is flawed. One of the main reasons for thinking the methodology is flawed is that we're already dealing in fractions. A congregation may get 0.8 of a minister and then might get 0.3 of a UPA allocation. And that, if they were put together, that would give you an ability to call a minister, if that were the congregation's view, or to call a deacon or whatever they wanted to do. And the fact that you're allowed to do it one way and not the other, I find rather odd. So there's a principle here that we're a national church. And if I was a minister in another presbytery, I would be able to take that allocation and say, well, we want to use it as an MDS worker, or we want to use it as a Minister of Word and Sacrament. But in Glasgow Presbytery, we're not allowed to do this. And I don't think that's right. I think as a national church, it should be the same throughout the church. And the fact that we're looking to save jobs is a lot of these jobs will end up going through what personnel call natural wastage, and they're not going to happen immediately. In our own cluster, none of the ministers plan to retire during the lifetime of the presbytery plan. So I really just think it's not a good idea not being able to use that. It creates a massive amount of uncertainty for the congregations involved as well. So I wonder if we could sound out, is there any way of sounding out either the committee or the Assembly in terms of whether they think this is a good idea or not, because I think it's a very bad idea, and I think we should have the same principle throughout the church, the same way as we have with salaries and everything else. Thank you, Moderator.
Convener.
I'm taking advice from my colleagues who are on the Presbytery Mission Plan Implementation Group. At the start of presbytery planning, we encouraged our congregations to be imaginative, creative, to think out of the box. It's been up to presbyteries how they have chosen to go about the task of presbytery mission planning and how they have chosen to deploy the ministry allocation that they have been given. I don't think there are no ministers of word and sacrament in priority area parishes in Glasgow. I'm sure there are some alongside MDS. Okay. Yes? Yes, which is not what you implied in your question, sorry. The plan is reviewed annually, and so the annual review would be the time within your presbytery to take your concerns forward.
Okay, thank you. We have 3 people on the screen, and after that we're going to move to the vote. Just a reminder too that you've got 3 minutes. We have not been using the bell, but we will. Brian Kerr, James Reid, Fiona Gardner. Thank you.
Moderator Kerr 231. It's just picking up on something the convener said in response to Gillian Rooney's question about presbyteries. It's now in the hands of presbyteries and we need to get on with it. Now, I'm aware. I'm the deputy clerk of a presbytery on the naughty step. It's a position I've been used to throughout my life and a position I'm now used to in my professional life. I'm okay with that. We are taking time to get it right. Taking time to get it right when we're asking congregations to be imaginative and creative is really, really important. To rush headlong into things is not helpful and will also not best serve the needs of God's mission in our church. We need to take time. We've all got the mission plans, well, some of you have got the mission plans sorted and 30 have been approved. However, following that, and the convener mentioned this earlier, there are periods of readjustment where congregations have to come together, where that has to be negotiated by presbyteries, and that takes time in already stretched presbyteries with, as we've already heard very eloquently today, ministers and others are under huge amounts of stress, even when we are kind to each other and we are taking time off. But in all of that, we've also got to work out adjustment. We've also got to get congregations and Kirk sessions to learn new ways of working. Who wants 3 Kirk sessions to be united and have a Kirk session of 120? So what does this now mean for our leadership? And before presbyteries rightly give permission to a newly adjusted charge to call, surely there has to be a time for that congregation to get to know each other, to understand what its mission is going to be and the part it's going to play in God's mission. And only then can they begin to think about what sort of minister they might be looking for to ascertain whether God is calling them there. That takes time. I recognise we've got 30 plans approved and there will be more approved soon. I also recognise, though, that we do need time for congregations to actually work out how this newly adjusted frame fits into the plan and where a minister comes into that. So I would endorse what Gillian said and just plead with the forum that some certainty needs to be given to our assistant ministers who are doing a sterling job in many difficult situations. But I think that the vacancy list is suddenly going to explode with vacancies, and the wheels of the ministerial churches moving on is going to happen soon. I hear you. I tell you, for not using it, that finger's awfully heavy. No. It's going to take time. More than 3 minutes, more than a few months, but moderator, we need the forum to recognise this. Thank you.
Thank you. James Reid and then Fiona Gardner, and then we'll move to the vote.
3. Jim Reid, 291. Speaking as a presbytery moderator, I hope to be inundated with inductions and ordinations during my moderatorial year. It will be a busyness that will lift not only my heart, but the heart of presbytery as a whole. But my concern is for those we have in post, ministries that we have in post, that they be supported and encouraged. Being part of the transition from the 3 legacy presbyteries in Fife to the Presbytery of Fife, and previously chaplain in one of the legacy presbyteries, I and many others in that group were determined that we put pastoral care, we put our money where our mouth is, and it be supported, financially supported, and we do that. And I would hope that other presbyteries, at whatever stage of the process they're involved in, are doing the same. We benefit from Ascend, yes, but as presbyteries grow bigger, then we need to support each other in presbytery, seriously in pastoral care. And there are different ways of doing pastoral care, and one that I've benefited from, both in the Macedonian ministry cohort and in group pastoral supervision, is to bring colleagues together and to share and to pray and to support each other. It has been, to use the historic term, a presbytery of relief. And so many occasions, a support that has kept some colleagues in ministry and has encouraged them to continue their God-given calling. So I appeal to presbyteries. Yes, we want the numbers to increase and our allocations to be filled, but don't forget the essential support of those who are in post. May presbytery be a presbytery of relief for colleagues going forward. Thank you, moderator, and thank you, convener, for your report.
Thank you. And Fiona Gardner. Great. Thank you. Which microphone are you, Fee? 81? Microphone 81? You're on. Great.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So I am number 174. So thank you very much for the opportunity to be able to speak in this. I'm very grateful for the convener's words at the beginning and that positive framework, and also that image of new life. And I think that's what we all want to see. We want to see that new life. We want to see the wonderful and transformative love of Jesus Christ being able to be shared with everyone around. And we know the beauty of that, and it's a really inspiring thing. I'm really conscious of the presbytery plan and allocation of personnel, and that the next stage is going to be how we implement all of this. And I just have some real concerns about this, just because I think that sometimes the process can go well and people can make good decisions and choices, and it is really helpful. I think there can be some situations where there are anomalies, however, where there's a crisscross of different currents and it becomes really turbulent. And there's a lot of uncertainty and hurt, not just for people in ministry and ministry posts, but also amongst congregations as well. And so I would just appeal, particularly in this next stage as we're reviewing and as we're looking at things, that for those who are in difficult and hurting situations and with congregations who are really really questioning and searching what it's all about, that there would be support, that there would be a listening ear, that there would be a flexibility and a discernment and a compassion in the midst of these really difficult situations. I'm really grateful that I have had a lot of support in my current situation, but the congregations that I serve are really hurting and really bewildered. And so I just wanted that voice to be heard at the General Assembly. I thank you for all you're doing. I would really love to see more new growth all around. I'm a gardener by name, but not by nature. I have pruning happening in my garden, and when pruning happens well, there is new growth and buds and flowering. But I'm also aware that when I try and do it, sometimes I get the wrong bit and then it dies. And my prayer is that we get the right bits and that we have blooming and not dying. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Fiona. What a great way to end this section. Section 9. And online. Excellent. There's a new section. There's a new section 10. In the name of Ross Blackman, and I would call on Ross. There we
Microphone
go.
51.
Great.
That's all. Good. Blackman 223, and convener of the Committee on Ecumenical Relations. Moderator, this would be an ecumenical matter. For the sake of brevity, and because I don't think this is too contentious, or certainly hopefully not, and because of the bell, I don't wish to repeat the arguments that are made on Saturday when we presented our report. But suffice to say that despite the imperative in mission planning to take account of and consult with potential ecumenical partners, the timescales were short. We acknowledged as a church that this has rarely taken place, and in some cases the presbytery plans have cut across some fantastic existing work. Now, understandably, our colleagues in a number of the other denominations have looked on agog as they stand ready as partners to bring the ordinances of Christian religion to Scotland, and indeed we've acknowledged that we can't do it alone. On Saturday, I asked whether we might have missed the boat, or whether we might yet capitalize on the mutual goodwill that we have. And after consultation with Faith Nurture Forum and the Principal Clerk, we determined that probably the most pragmatic way to attempt to perhaps remedy this would be to re-emphasize this in refreshed guidance on the Mission Plan Act, and to make this a solid part of the presbytery implementation and annual review processes, notwithstanding the decisions that have been made by General Assembly these last couple of days. But also, as Mr. Kerr said earlier, and Mrs. Rennick before him, we need to get this right. Some of this work has already begun, particularly on the guidance, since February, and Ecumenical Relations would be delighted to assist further as well. So, Moderator, I simply move a new Section 10 to the Faith Nurture Forum report in my own name to reaffirm the ecumenical aspect of the secondary principles and existing guidance relating to the Presbytery Mission Plan Act, and A, instruct the Faith Nurture Forum to emphasize this in future guidance, and B, instruct presbyteries to consider this and articulate it more clearly in implementation and at the annual review of presbytery mission plans. But I don't want this to just be words. This morning we were asked in opening devotions to think about a new day and change and the footprint that we might leave behind in our lives. It's my hope that as we enter into the spirit of this and take the ministry of all believers to Scotland, regardless of our, as we heard yesterday, our country of origin, the colour of our skin, of our gender, our accent, whether we're hearing impaired, or our denomination. Is it too optimistic to think that this day and this week we might leave a footprint? I have a seconder, and I understand the convener may be willing to accept this. Thank you, Moderator.
Thank you. Seconder, can we hear you? Thank you, convener.
Moderator, yes, we are happy to accept. We all heard the debate on Saturday, and I've been instructed to tell you that there will be a meeting for planning conveners on the 17th? 13th of June. So on the 13th of June, you know one of the items on the agenda. But all of you here have heard, and we are all affirming this. So I thank you for bringing it forward. Thank you.
Thank you, absolutely. Is the Assembly happy to accept this new Section 10? And online. Excellent. Thank you, Ross. We move back to Section 10 in the print. We've got several folk wanting to speak. So start with Scott Paget, and then John Arms, Ross Blackman, Mark Evans. Thank you.
Thank you, Moderator. Paget 259. Just a question for the convener. Can the convener give an assurance that the review of the future of the diaconate will include a consideration if the diaconate is a formal place of ordination for volunteers and professionals who work with young people on behalf of the Church of Scotland and wish to be ordained within a formal recognised ministry?
I've been advised that that is a question for the Theological Forum, which is one of the things they will be taking forward. I think the best person to talk to is probably Mark Evans, who is who's up there in the gallery, and Mark is the convener of the Diaconate Council, president of the Diaconate Council. So he would be the man to talk to first of all, but I think it is something for the Theological Forum. Thank you.
John Arms. Yeah.
Yes, John Arms, number 508. Moderator, I just really want to speak in support and encouragement of this old Section 10. The Scottish Episcopal Church has been on I suppose, what you might call a journey of rediscovery of what the distinctive diaconate might look like. And I'm pleased to say that over the last 15 years, an increasing number of people have come forward with a really distinctive sense of calling to be deacons. I know that's slightly confused in our polity in the Anglican Communion because we have a transitional diaconate as well, in that everyone who is ordained priest is first ordained a deacon. However, I would confirm and underline that the diaconate I'm speaking about here is a distinctive calling in which people do not move on then to be ordained priests, because they are expressing and inhabiting and embodying the outward call of Christ to serve the world. In the course of this journey, we have adjusted our methods of discernment, and we have also constructed some very good modules in our training institute for those called the distinctive diaconate. And I would underline that these are modules which will be available for any denomination to share in as well if they wished. Part of this journey over the last 15 years, of course, has been a journey alongside you, alongside your deacons. And I hope that this journey will continue. Not least because if we look back at everything that's really been said at this assembly, we are very much at a time in the life of the world where the diaconal calling of Christians is absolutely central to our mission. The outward-facing call to social service, to a preferential option for the poor, to a prophetic call for justice, these are things we should all be part of course, but there's something our deacons help to embody for us. So therefore, why not work together on this? I hope that this is work that can be done together, and certainly the Scottish Episcopal Church is eager to do that. Thank you, Moderator.
Thank you. Thank you. We have Ross Blackman and then Mark Evans, and then we will move to the vote.
51. Yep. Number 223, Ross Blackman. I did have a question. It's withdrawn since I had a brief discussion during the circulation break, but I would also like to support this section, particularly on behalf of our hard-working and underappreciated deacons who have been called to that role of leadership in our denomination. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Mark Evans. There. Excellent, you're on.
Mark Evans, number 50, President of Diaconate Council. Moderator, more years ago than I wish to remember, I attended the Assembly Youth Night here in this hall when I heard the late John Bell speak about a call to service. John's words confirmed my sense of call to a diaconal ministry. In the 30 years I've been attending this General Assembly, I have heard consecutive assemblies congratulate and affirm the diaconate and diaconal ministry. Over the past few years, we have heard much about new forms of ministry and pioneering ministry. Well, for over 130 years, the diaconate has served Christ and this church, using a variety of gifts through a variety of service, providing new forms and cutting-edge ministry. From those deaconesses who followed and served the herring fleets, to deacons who served the housing schemes of Scotland in the 70s and the 80s, in some of the most deprived areas of this nation. The modern diaconate continues to serve in schools and prisons, hospitals and parishes and communities throughout Scotland. We are called to be pastors, apostles and prophets, working in partnership and collaboration with others, building bridges between the secular and the sacred, the seen and the unseen. However, as we discuss the future of ministry in the Church, the General Assembly should understand that the future of the diaconate within the Church of Scotland is uncertain, and that diaconal ministry in its current form is unsustainable. The General Assembly moderator may wish to note that there are now less than 30 active deacons within the Kirk. Of those 30, almost half are employed by external agencies or bodies. The Church and this General Assembly needs to decide if it wants a diaconate, and if it is prepared not only to recognise and affirm and give kind words about diaconal ministry, but to invest in this important work of the Church, a ministry which serves some of the most vulnerable and marginalised in our nation.
Thank you, Mark. I think we're going to... Sure. Sorry about that. Of course you can, Convener.
Moderator, thanks very much, Mark. It's just to say that the new Ministries Apprenticeship Scheme, which we are currently creating, we are hoping will include diaconate in that. So that's a discussion also to be had with the folks around the table. So thank you.
Thank you, Convener. We'll now move to Section 10. Does the Assembly approve Section 10? And online. Excellent. Thank you. We have a new Section 11.
No, sorry, we just 11 in the print.
Okay, no, we don't have a new Section 11. It's 11 in the print. Oh, now we're talking. And online? Okay, and we have 2 new 12s. Linda Watt. And the first one is in the name of Linda Watt. So I would ask Linda to speak to us. Thank you, Linda.
Thank you, Moderator. The motion as put forward in your Assembly Hub isn't quite the motion I had put forward, but I'm grateful to the clerks for amending it. I wanted to start with an apology to commissioners. I was approached yesterday after my question by a commissioner who didn't understand the term I used of tied housing. So for anyone else who doesn't understand that term, that's housing that goes with a post, so that when you leave the post, you leave the house. So the challenges facing the Church includes recruitment and retention of ministers of word and sacrament and others. And anything which impedes that, I think, has to be addressed. Ministers are university graduates who are highly trained and valued not only by their individual congregations, but by the church and wider civic society. Graduates expect a lifetime earning potential to allow them to house and provide for their own families. They have a calling, they have a vocation. There are other individuals in our society who have vocations. I myself had a vocation to become a doctor and then a psychiatrist. And I followed that through. As a committed Christian, I used my Christian values in my day-to-day practice. And I say that my lifetime earning potential was quite substantially more than my fellow graduates in Word and Sacrament. Now, I do appreciate that it can be a bit embarrassing to talk about individual matters of finance, but I think it's hugely important. I read with enormous sadness of the numbers of ministers who've had to apply to the church's hardship funds to pay for living expenses. In the electricity crisis, they too have been subject to the cost of living expenses. And how can we expect them to give of their best if they are worried about paying bills? I've also been concerned about ministers at the point of retirement. As part of my reading for preparation here as a new commissioner, and in discussion with some of the newly retired ministers I know, unless they have a partner who is a graduate or has a significant salary, they have to supply themselves with future living accommodation, which is they have to come to the Housing and Loan and ask for help. Now, I think in this day and age, being offered $200,000 for a house to be bought for you to live in and rent for life is unacceptable. And I think we need inspired and inspiring ministers of Word and Sacrament. And I would urge that we have an opportunity to look at some, not necessarily all parishes, being given the opportunity to have no manse at all and allowing individuals to live in their own homes or to acquire their own homes for their future. Minister, commissioners, moderator, commissioners, I would urge you to support my motion.
Moderator, point of order.
Thank you.
Not read out loud.
Point of order. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. And can I apologise to the Assembly that we missed that? And if you would like, I shall read it to you now. So thank you, Erin. So, Dr. Watt's motion is as follows. Instruct the Faith Nurture Forum to consider the original reasons for asking congregations to make manses available to ministers of Word and Sacrament and to determine whether these reasons are relevant today, and to send this report to the General Trustees Manse Liaison Group for inclusion in their report to the General Assembly of 2024.
Thank you. Robert Allen. Okay. I have no one on the screen asking to speak, so I will. Yes. Okay, I haven't seen anything, but of course. If you could give us your name and number, thank you.
Thank you, Moderator. Gary Peacock, 104. I don't think I want to oppose this, but I would just like to perhaps say that as it's considered, to put the point of view of those of us who are very grateful to live in a manse. I know there are always issues with manses and, you know, some are better than others and all that. But as somebody who lives in a rural area, I certainly, my feeling would be that I certainly wouldn't be able to afford to live in a house that was large enough to have a proper study and somewhere to work. And we know in this age of so many people working from home since the pandemic, many people are in the situation where they simply are working in their bedrooms and all the rest of it. So, I mean, I would like to say that I think manses enable all of us to have a house that has that space, which perhaps we otherwise wouldn't be able to afford. So I'm not going to oppose this, but I think as we go forward, I hope that as the Faith Leadership team look at it, that they will also take into account the views of those who feel that man's provision is a very great help to us in our ministry. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert Fowley. No, there we are.
Fowley 380.
Thank you, Robert.
I know there's a lot of work going on around Manses, but I find it very surprising that the mover of the motion seemed to be addressing much of the content to stipend levels, and yet we're discussing Manses. And you can't talk about one without the other. And so I actually can't support this motion. It doesn't make sense to talk purely about Manses if you aren't equally going to address stipend levels.
Okay. Oh, we've got Hugh Conkey. Okay. Hugh. Okay. There you are. Hi, Hugh. Go for it.
Okay. Conkey 378. Moderator, I do want to oppose and resist this motion on several grounds. Firstly, that this is work that's been done again and again and again, repeatedly over the years. And at this time, when the General Trustees are looking at things themselves, and the Faith Nurture Forum has been asking us, please not to give us too much extra stuff this year because we are incredibly busy as it is and can hardly cope, that it's not the right time to be doing this. In any case, the motion that's actually there is too restrictive. What we want to look at, if we were doing the job, is not the original reasons, but what the reasons are today, and whether the reasons we have today are still applicable. And I also think that the Church has gained a great deal of value from having ministers live in their parish and be part of the community to which they're ministering over the years. And in many places, both rural and high-cost city places, we could not, ministers on present stipend levels could not possibly live in their parish by supplying their own accommodation while they're in service. We're talking about putting people off. Manses may put some people off, but if you just remove Manses without substantially increasing the stipend, you are asking ministers, including existing ministers, who perhaps for 30 or 40 years have been basing their finances and their plans on the fact that they will have a manse. You are subjecting them to a very steep reduction in their remuneration package, which would not be fair at all. So for all these reasons, I don't think it's the right time to produce this now.
Okay. Thank you. I am going to call this because I think we've got to be moving on. So I'm going to ask Linda if she would like to reply, and then I'm going to ask the convener. Thank you.
Thank you, moderator. And fellow commissioners, forgive me if I have not got the language of this correct. Of course, I would never suggest that if you were not to have a manse, you would not have a consequent increase in your stipend. You would have to have that. You couldn't possibly retain the current stipend levels. And I'm not suggesting that this would be something that we would deal with in every manse. It would be for local places to discuss. However, you know, if there was an opportunity for people to live locally in their own house where they could live long term, because remember, when you demit from your charge, you move home. And demitting office is a hard enough task to do without having to leave your home of many years. I appreciate the anxieties, but I would urge you to give us the opportunity to look at the issue in the round. It's not to come to a nil conclusion, but to look at the opportunity in the round. Thank you.
Thank you. Convener.
Moderator, as has been made clear, it's not straightforward because there is the tie-in with stipend. We're not minded to accept it as it is. We do have the General Trustees Man's liaison group on which Faith Nurture sit. So rather than the double handling, you know, just to remit it straight to them would be my suggestion, rather than Faith Nurture first of all and then reporting to them.
Okay. Thank you. We are going to take this as an electronic vote, and I'm going to ask Michael to explain how that'll happen.
The new section 12 has been read by the clerk. Those in the hall will vote using their electronic handsets. Those online will use the Zoom, the buttons that are on the Assembly Hub, making sure they press the red current live debate buttons so they appear. We will press for or against. If you are in favour of inserting the new section, you will press 1 for. If you are against, you will press button 2. The voting is now open. There are 10 seconds remaining. The voting is now closed.
For the new section 12-106, against the new section 12-230. So the new section 12 falls. Thank you. Now we call Robert Allen for a second new section 12. And I'll call on the principal clerk to read it out.
Thank you, Moderator. Just also to remind Commissioners that all notices of motion are also on the website under the collated deliverances. So they're only set at a certain time, so clearly some do come in when they're not on the website, but just to help folk with that. We have a new section 10 as follows. Instruct the Faith Action Programme leadership team to liaise with the Assembly trustees and General Trustees and others as appropriate as part of the action of manses to bring proposals to the General Assembly 2024 which would allow the option for ministers to live in their own home and be paid a housing allowance for use as a manse.
Robert.
Thank you, Moderator. Robert Allen, 221. We're not finished with Manceys just yet, folks. I have one of the solutions to the various problems surrounding Manceys. Give ministers the option of choosing to live in their own home. Many would like to do so. Let's finally make it happen. The Assembly trustees have noted the strength of feeling at Assembly last year about ministers' welfare, specifically around rising energy costs. Dave Kendall, in a recent webinar, stated that the condition of some Manceys needs attention. If it's worthy of mentioning, then it's likely a problem of reasonable significance. So much so that the Faith Nurture Forum have said in their report there is considerable regret on the part of the General Trustees and the Forum, not to mention anger and hurt in Man's families, that some presbyteries have seen fit to regard some Manceys as acceptable, which would not pass the tolerable accommodation standard seen as good practice by local authorities in social housing, never mind private residential tenancies. Moderator, that is a disgrace. There is a problem, and it's not a new problem, folks. We've needed to address this problem for years. Once and for all, let's lay down a marker at this General Assembly. Another year is a long time for anyone who's living in substandard conditions. Oh, we can say, oh, some are good, some are not so good. That's not good enough. It's been said that HMRC won't allow mixed man's provision because it's of tax implications. I have a letter from HMRC willing to sit down with my employers to talk about this. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. URC Church have this kind of scheme. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. If you're a minister who likes to live in a manse, super, live in it. And if it would be so difficult in some charges to find a house, then continue to live in a well-maintained manse. We spend all our energy looking at the manse estate, sorting out the problems. Let's half the problem by letting ministers stay in their own home and look after it themselves. Some charges, even after paying a modest housing allowance, could benefit to the tune of thousands of pounds from rental of their manse. You know, these cash-strapped times, my congregation could be about 10 grand better off with me living in my own house. A minister can buy a house that they can afford and afford to heat. The minister can be in a house that they can be used for retirement. The minister can live in a house and not worry about their family having to move if anything fatal happens to said minister. The minister can do alterations and decorations in their home without the ignominy of having a Kirk session discuss its merits or otherwise. Do you know what? If the Faith Action leadership team and the General Trustees don't have time to do this, I volunteer. And I'm sure others would too. The General Trustees, as was mentioned, are proposing a manse liaison group. Great, says I. So I inquired if this would include the option of staying in your own house as a manse. And I was told it might make the agenda, but it's so far down the agenda that no one could tell me if and when it would ever be discussed. That's why we need this proposal. That's why we need to put it high on our agenda. If you want to know all the details about this argument, you can look at it on my website, www.reformthechurchofscotland.org. www.reformthechurchofscotland.org. Look for Manceys under Kites for Change. But finally, moderator, choice. Choice. Jesus gives us a choice whether or not to follow him. In recent General Assemblies, we've debated same-sex relationships, and what did we do? We gave people in the church a choice. We have the traditional stance, but you can choose to depart from it. Why on earth have we cloaked a mystery around Manceys that we cannot least say Manceys are the tradition, but you can depart from them if you choose to do so? It baffles me. The Assembly trustees have said that as a church, we have to give up some of our established ways in order to re-establish a new and vibrant church. And this is part of that movement. So I move this new section, and I plead with the General Assembly to accept as we be a modern church for a modern era. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you. We've got more people to talk.
Faith Action leadership team want to accept it. So.
Oh, fantastic. Okay. The convener is willing to accept this.
Well, actually, the convener is just going to say the Faith... The convener really doesn't have any locus in that she will not be on the Faith Action leadership team, but I have been assured that FAPLT, as we call them, would be willing to accept this. I'm also conscious, though, that Assembly trustees and general trustees are part of this. I see a nod from David Cameron.
And also, I believe Scott Rennie would like to speak.
Moderator, Scott Rennie, and it's 491, and I happen to be the Vice Chair of the General Trustees. I am quite in sympathy with many of the remarks that Mr Allen has made. I am concerned about the wording of this particular motion, though, because I feel, and maybe the clerks can advise me, I fear it ties a review to a particular outcome, as opposed to asking a review to ask a question and come to an answer. The answer is already laid out, and that's my only anxiety about it. The General Trustees are committed, as we say in our report tomorrow, to a review of Manses, top to bottom. Mr Allen is entirely correct in his assessment of the condition of many Manses. I have to remind the Assembly that presbyteries are responsible for ensuring Manses are kept in a good condition by presbyteries. That doesn't have to wait for any review of any kind. That is something presbyteries ought to be doing already. I think sometimes we look for the centre for answers when the answers actually lies at presbytery level, and we need to be better at presbytery level at replying. But what I want to say to the Assembly is we are committed in this year coming to a top-to-bottom review of Manse provision. Is it possible to have a mixed economy? Are we better to stick with Manses? Should we abandon it? We are committed to having exactly the kind of review that actually both movers of the motion have asked for. Not just a passing over, but a thorough review. I can give the Assembly that assurance. What I don't want is us to be tied to a defined outcome before we've actually done the work. That doesn't... I understand why it's appealing, but I don't actually think that's a good way to make decisions. Let us do the work first. Let us come back with a really thought-through report, and then we can debate it after that work's been done. And that's the only reason I would have to kind of decline to support this motion, because if I'm concerned it gives us the answer before we've had a chance to look at the evidence. And I don't think that's good decision-making.
Okay, thank you. We have several people on, and I'm of a mind to hear some people, because I think there's quite a bit of discussion here. So I'm going to call on Ramsey Shields and Anna Rodwell. Microphone 82.
And it's a question, if I can ask a question.
All questions are always in order.
If we went down the road of a hybrid situation where some ministers had an allowance to live in their own home and others lived in a manse, or a mixed economy, as Scott Rennie has just called it, would that have tax implications or benefit in kind implications for those who remained living in manses?
Procurator.
Thank you, Moderator. Yes, Moderator, it's perhaps worth saying, particularly in reference to whoever said that we look at this over and over again, we do. I looked at it in 2009, I've obviously been around too long. I looked at it in 2009 and wrote an opinion about it. The point that Mr Shields has just made is exactly correct, that ministers at the moment benefit from the living accommodation exemption, whereby the provision of accommodation in the form of manses is not regarded as taxable by the revenue, and that is on the basis of an expectation that ministers will live in their manses. Now, in preparation for today, I did look at it last night, and the law is still the same and the Inland Revenue guidance is still the same, so it looks as though the position in that respect has not materially changed since I looked at it in 2009. It seems to me, looking at the big picture, that if you were to change the practice and change the expectation that ministers will live in manses, then the revenue might indeed, as Mr Allen has found, become very interested indeed. And if you involve the taxman, who is not currently taking any portion of the pot of money available for ministers' accommodation. If you involve the taxman, that seems to me to reduce the amount of money in the system overall. So I would urge caution, and I think I very much agree with what Mr. Rennie says about not for framing motions that have predetermined conclusions attached.
Okay. Thank you. Anna Rodwell, Gary Peacock. Anna, thank you.
Anna Rodwell, 65. I have a question, but I want to say I love my manse. I could not live with all my many children and now Ukrainian refugee and have public rooms for meetings. I just couldn't do it if I didn't have a manse. My question is it not still the case that when you retire or when you move, charge, you can't be in the same parish? And if retiring is stressful and you have your own house, then how's that going to work if you're going to have to move to a different parish? Thank you.
Thank you. Convener.
Okay.
Not the case.
The wisdom round the table tells me it's not the law of the church, but it is the good practice of the church.
Thank you. Thank you, Convener. We have Gary Peacock and... Or do we? You withdraw. Thank you, Gary. Yeah. Yeah. I think we'll get... So I'm gonna call on Robert Allen and then the convener.
Moderator, I've heard all of these arguments for the last 30 years. And people talk about the mess the church is in just now, and we're going through a real upheaval time kind of thing. You know, 5 years ago, instead of asking for a radical plan, we could have just thrown our hands up in the air and just say that these problems are just insurmountable. We could just, let's just die off quietly. But we didn't. And we're in a challenging time, and we're in a challenging time that includes Manses as well. I'm glad to hear the General Trustees have got it on their agenda. That's not what I was told when I asked about it. And that's the danger, that it gets kicked into the long grass. If you come back, we can leave it the proposal it is. It's not tying anyone's hands. If you come back next year and say, this is absolutely impossible, then for the following reasons, then we'll need to look at that. But let's talk to the HMRC about these things. Let's try and get a new way forward. Let's try and be a modern church. Who else lives in tied houses? Nobody. Let's move on. Let's move on. Let's try and get this option on the table once and for all. I'm sure I speak for many people around the country who are ministers who would love to stay in their own home. And yeah, I live in a great manse, and I live in a manse that's very well maintained. So I'm speaking from that point of view. So yes, let's move on. Let's do this.
And convener.
I'm leaving it to the mind of the Assembly. You've heard the words of the Procurator. You've heard the promise from the General Trustees, who will liaise, I am very sure, with Assembly Trustees and with the Faith Action Plan leadership team. So, the mind of the Assembly.
Thank you. This will, of course, be an electronic vote, and I will ask Michael to explain how.
Moderator, Mayor 567. We've called for an electronic vote. The wording has been read by the clerk. Those in the hall will use their handsets to press 1 for or 2 against. Those online will use the Assembly Hub, making sure you press the current live debate button so that voting buttons appear. We'll have 30 seconds, and the voting starts now. There are 10 seconds remaining. The vote is now closed.
Okay, for the new section 12, 162, against 175. So the new section 12 falls. So we now move to section 12 in print. And I see no one wanting to speak, so section 12 as in the print. And online, thank you. And we have a new section 13 in the name of Sandy Horsburgh, so I call on Sandy. Thank you.
Thank you, Moderator. Sandy Horsburgh, 61. Would the Principal Clerk like to read this, or would you like me to do it?
Thank you.
Well, what would you like, Sandy?
Oh,
Go on, I think we'll have...
You do it so much better.
Oh, that was the right answer. Alison's taught you well. Sandy's new section 13 is instruct the Faith Nurture Forum to commission or otherwise conduct a comprehensive independent survey of ministerial well-being with the aim of deepening understanding of the causes of work-related ministerial stress and developing strategies to reduce it.
I told you she did
Beautiful.
it so much better. Thank you, Moderator. In 2019, the Scottish Episcopal Church reported the results of a survey of clergy well-being. I was impressed that they had been brave enough to ask their clergy deep questions about what sustained them and fulfilled them, and about what impacted upon them in a negative way. The survey was comprehensive and revealing, and what stood out for me most clearly was that this was a church which was prepared to take the care of its clergy very seriously, and to begin by finding out from the clergy themselves what needed to be fixed. I think it's time we did something similar. We are in crisis. Ministerial morale is low. Presbytery mission planning has resulted in some colleagues feeling that they are surplus to requirements, while others are looking at having their workload significantly increased, often without additional resources. I have lost count of the number of conversations I've had with friends and colleagues about early retirement, about being on antidepressants, about having lost all enthusiasm, about really worrying about how we'll be able to cope, and people saying, if they offered redundancy, I'd be first in the queue. And every minister here will recognise these conversations. The survey I have in mind would ask things like, are you getting enough time off? Do you feel your manse is adequate? I don't know if I should have gone there, to be honest, but you know. How easy or difficult is it for you to get pulpit supply? Is your stipend adequate? Are you satisfied with your pension arrangements? What help do you need in order to do your job? What development opportunities would you welcome? Have you felt bullied? How often do you think about leaving on a scale from never to daily? And every minister here will be able to add questions and concerns. Asking for a survey is not asking for much, but a church should be an institution which has care at its very heart. And doing a survey and committing to learning from and acting on its results would, I believe, be a real sign of this church caring for its ministers. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, convener. And then we'll move to...
Moderator, those of you who have been at previous assemblies may remember that in 2019, the Ministries' Council undertook a major study on ministerial resilience and well-being.
Convener, apologies. We've got a lot, my mistake, we've got a lot of people who would probably like to speak first, and then we'll bring you to close. But the convener is, I believe, not of a mind, but that's okay. We've got, I think, what Tim Norwood. We've got several people. We can't take them all, or we will be here forever. But I think it's really important we get a flavor of where people are with this. So, Tim Norwood, John Ferguson, and Fiona Tweedy. Thank you.
Thank you, Moderator. Tim Norwood, 511 Ecumenical Representative. Officially, my official response to this would be we've been doing some interesting work in the Church of England on clergy stress, and we have been doing similar surveys to those done here, and have produced a clergy wellbeing covenant, which has moved things forward. What I'm about to say is less official and is more related to conversations and discussions and research I've been involved in with colleagues. And one of the interesting conversations I've had recently has focused around the concept of occupational burnout as a prism through which to look at the issue of clergy stress. Occupational burnout, particularly through the work of Christine Maslach and her colleagues, who've been researching this since the mid-70s. And there are various interesting things that have come out of that. The first is their concept of risk factors, which are incredibly interesting, and we've been looking at those very carefully. Around 6 key factors: workload, the amount of workload people are under; control, your personal ability to control what you are doing; reward, how rewarding does your work seem; community, is your community, your relationships working for you; fairness, and values. And they suggest that when there's a disconnect in these 6 areas, there are stressors. And certainly when we've been talking to Anglican clergy, we have seen high levels of stress and high levels of disconnect in all of these areas. And that's a concern. The second point that we've actually been finding helpful through that research is that Maslach suggests you've got to look at both internal and external strategies when you're looking at burnout and stress, not just the things that people can deal with inside. So a lot of our well-being strategies focus on therapy, doing sensible things, taking time off, giving time to yourself, counselling and coaching. And for many clergy, that immediately feels like an extra burden. And so one of the things we often hear is, I'm stressed, and now you're giving me lots of more things to be stressed about. The external factors really need to be looked at. What are the things that are actually happening, the structural issues, the work-related things which are calling people to experience stress? And I would hope that the survey that Sandy is suggesting would take that into account, and not just the internal things about people working too hard and not giving time to themselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, and then Fiona Tweedy. Thank you. No.
Moderator,
Microphone 51, John Ferguson, 321. It was just to speak very much in support of Sandy's motion. I think it's an excellent idea. As a full-time presbytery clerk now, I've found that a huge amount of my time is taken up in dealing with ministers who are under severe stress, who are off work, dealing with all sorts of the kind of issues we've been thinking about this morning. And I think it is essential that more must be done, and more must be done to understand more fully why we're in this situation. The question I wanted to ask, moderator, of the convener, if I could, is that I'm very much aware that in dealing with these situations, we have a lot of support as clerks from the 121 pastoral care team. The 121 pastoral care team consists of 3 people, one of whom is an administrator. And I find it really quite astonishing that this team is so small in the face of what we are coping with just now. And so my question is, why is the pastoral team at 121, which I stress again do a brilliant job, so small, and why is it not being more fully resourced?
Convener.
Moderator, the pastoral care team based in Edinburgh really deal with in extremis, the really tough cases. We heard earlier about the responsibility of presbyteries to provide pastoral care for those within their bounds. And we had the interesting example from Jim Reid from Fife Presbytery. So this is one area where we have to work together, that there are times when the Edinburgh team, they are needed because of the situation. But local presbyteries also have a responsibility.
Thank you, Convener. I call on Fiona Tweedy.
3. Moderator Fiona Tweedy, Commissioner number 24. I'm going to have to declare, I think, 3 different hats at this point. I am statistician in the national offices. I also run a research consultancy, which at this very moment is in fact carrying out the analysis of the very survey that Tim has spoken about. The Living Ministry Survey in the Church of England has been going for some time and is excellent at theoretical and practical levels, and I would highly commend that. Basically, I want to speak in favour of this. We have the capacity to do this in Scotland, whether internally we have extremely good relations with the people within the Church of England in data services as they are now, who could help us to do this. Equally, there are external companies who could also take this on and who have this experience. We welcome research happening. It could be done internally with appropriate resourcing if that was felt to be appropriate. I would encourage the Assembly to support this motion. Thank you.
I'm minded to take 2 more speakers. So the next one will be David Denniston, and then we've not heard from an elder for a while, so Judith Thomason after that. And then hopefully we can maybe move towards the vote. We've got quite a lot of business still to get through. So David Denniston first, and then Judith Thomason.
Moderator Denniston, 169, speaking in support again of Sandy Horsburgh's proposed new section of the Deliverance. I speak to you from the sunlit uplands of recent retirement, where all is healthy and happy and stress-free. But one of the results of being newly retired is that I've had more time to speak with colleagues, and I've had many colleagues coming to me, many who are still within ministry, many who are younger, and I have heard so many tales of stress and of distress and discouragement and disillusionment. It is actually quite discouraging for me to have heard so many of these. I realise it's not everyone. I realise that many are thriving at the moment. They maybe are just the people who don't talk to me who are thriving. Maybe that's why. I recognise that it's something that we all share together, the responsibility for helping one another. I realise that we have our own responsibilities as ministers to look after ourselves, and I certainly recognise the support of the staff at 121 and have good reason to recognise and be grateful for that. However, there is still a crisis out there of stress in the ministry. There are still many people who are suffering because of the pandemic and because of the predatory planning process, but it's more than that. It's bigger than that and it's deeper than that, and we need to do the research. I would say that investigating resilience in ministry is not the same as researching stress and what the causes of stress might be. Way back in the 1970s, as I was completing my studies for ministry in a postgraduate year, I did some research into stress in people who worked in a church environment. And one of the things I discovered there when I was doing that research was that there were particular and peculiar factors that affected people who work within the church environment that did not affect people in other workplaces. That's why I really strongly support Sandy's proposal and urge the Assembly to agree to this.
And finally, Judith Thomason.
Microphone 53. Judith Thomason, 204. I'm a first-time commissioner. This is just a very short query. I'm not very clear with these discussions about when we're talking about ministers, whether you're talking about ministers of word and sacrament or MDSs, or whether this was covering both. The discussions have talked about, it feels like ministers of word and sacrament, but I'm very aware of MDSs who are under a great deal of pressure.
Okay. Thank you for that. And I was going to propose we move to ask Sandy Horsburgh maybe to respond to that, and perhaps he could answer that question too as he sums up before I move to the convener.
Thank you, Moderator. Yes, Sandy Horsburgh, once again, number 61. Of course, I absolutely take your point, and I hope that this would be extended to all those in the recognised ministries of the Church. As I tried to indicate in my earlier question, this is not about pastoral care. I have absolutely no complaints about pastoral care. The team in the central offices, as my friend John Ferguson was saying, do an excellent job. And I'm sure many of us, myself included, have benefited greatly from the pastoral care that we receive at presbytery level. What this is about is trying to get upstream, in that analogy that Desmond Tutu used, to find out what is causing the problems so that things are addressed before people are needing to access the pastoral care. The convener, as she was cut off in her kind of reply, gave away, I think, something that she's going to say, and that is to refer to the study into ministerial resilience that was done up to and published in 2019. I had a wee look at that study. It's based very heavily on the idea of personality types, and it talks about introverts and extroverts and things like Machiavellianism, subclinical narcissism, and subclinical psychopathy. And it tries to indicate which personality types are most likely to be resilient as ministers. Now, I don't know which I fit into, but I think the convener may be coming to her own conclusions. Doubtless, and I know I've been a bit facetious, doubtless this study is useful in helping to select candidates for ministry, but it is not at all what I'm asking for. I'm asking for a survey which will ask practical questions which could lead to practical support for ministers, and I should say all those in the recognised ministries of the Church. We are told that the Central Church has a relentless focus on supporting the local. Here's a way to do it.
Moderator, we would build on the offer made by Fiona Tweedy. An internal and relational survey, so making use of resources that we have internally, so between Fiona and those on our support team, and look to publish results at GA 2024, just to give us that deepened understanding, which can be no bad thing. So, if not exactly. Or otherwise conduct. Yes, so I think we're going with the or otherwise conduct, so that we are making use of internal resource and ecumenical resource, because obviously there's learnings that we have from our brothers and sisters in the Church of England and other denominations. So if you would be happy that it's kind of reframed in a way that we can enable this to go forward, then we're in agreement.
Mr. Horsburgh?
I would say, Convener, that I phrased it to give you the choice.
Right. Thank you.
No, sorry, we've passed the stage of questions and comments. Convener, am I reading your mind and saying you're accepting?
Yes.
With those amendments?
With that understanding, and you've all heard it, so with that understanding.
And I'm sure we would encourage Mr. Horsburgh to speak to Mrs. Frew and her successors to make sure that what has been said just now by the convener is actually carried out. But we have to make sure that the Assembly wants to approve this. Is the Assembly minded to approve this? And online, it is carried. We go back to the number 13 in the print. Is that agreed? Oh, I beg your pardon. There is somebody wishing to speak on this. Andrew Gardner. Microphone 41. There you are.
Thank you, Moderator. Gardner, 322. And this seems like the best place to ask this question. And it's about the statistics in the report, page 12, table 4.34, about admissions conference of 2022. There were a lot of non-accepts at that conference, and it would be really helpful just to hear a bit more about why that happened.
Convener.
Moderator, thanks very much for the question. I can say at our forum, we were also very concerned to understand the why, why 16 out of 18 were non-accepts. What was it about the new process that had just been employed? The new process involves a stage 1 online assessment for all admission applicants. And it's only those proceeding further that will be invited to attend stage 2, which is a residential assessment in Scotland. In the first year of the new process, it did mean a lower number proceeded to stage 2. And at stage 2, the acceptance rate was not high. It would be too early to determine anything further from the statistics, as it only reflects 1 year and one specific group of applicants. One of the positives about the new process is it means that applicants do not have to incur the cost of coming to Scotland for assessment at the outset, with that initial assessment being online. And also to say that reapplication is possible under the terms of the Act. So, yeah, we are aware that it's a statistic, a figure that stands out, and we are keeping an eye on it to understand. It was maybe just a blip year, but it's only been 1 year, so we'll have to see going forward.
Thank you.
I'm seeing no further questions or comments. Assembly ready to vote on this? Assembly approve this? And online, it carries. It's my great pleasure to adjourn the Assembly for lunchtime, but please do return at 2 p.m. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Moderator.
I think we need to, if the General Assembly could come to order. Now it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon and you've all had something to eat. So to enliven you before we get back to business, we are going to sing. So I'm going to invite our presenter. And again, it focuses us, it reminds us why we're here, and it also might wake you up if you had a huge, big lunch. Colin.
Including the presenter. La 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 la. Your will be done on earth, O Lord. 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 My yeti way tando Yaakov. 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 My yeti way tando
Thank you, Assembly. Thank you, Colin. I call on the Assembly Business Committee for a quick update, and then we will return to the Faith Nurture report.
Thank you, Moderator. Cornerstone Bookshop have asked me to let you all know that they're offering 10% off all books this week, and they're at the end of, well, the Martin Hall for the rest of the week. Our business this afternoon, as the Moderator has said, we're continuing with the Faith Nurture Forum business. We'll then take the Special Committee on Gordon Presbytery, and then, because their chair has assured me that it will only take 60 seconds, and another appointment is coming up later this afternoon, we're going to take the Church Hymnary trustees at that point for that 60 seconds. If any other conveners would like to make me that offer, I might look favourably. And then, back on track, Social Care Council and the Church of Scotland Guild. We then take Legal Questions Committee, as we've arranged already, to deal with that remaindered business. And then we'll review where things are at, but we should be going to safeguarding, trustees of the Housing and Loan Fund, and finally, registration of Ministries Committee. Slightly amended running order for this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. Continue with section 14, as in print, and I see no notices of anyone wanting to speak. The Assembly approves section 14. And online. Thank you. We have a new section 15 in the name of Nathan McConnell.
Moderator.
And Nathan, is this seconded?
Yes, I have a seconder.
Great. Okay.
328, Nathan McConnell.
You need to read it. Are you going to read it, or would you like the principal clerk to read it? She does. Why don't we I tell you what, let's just go with the principal clerk.
She's got such a nice
And then we
voice.
don't even need to ask the question any longer. Principal clerk.
Thank you, Moderator. We have a new section 15, instruct the Faith Nurture Forum, 1, to create an apprenticeship programme for those seeking to serve young people and youth, and 2, enable local congregations to resource youth ministry through grant-making bodies of the church and congregational funds, being an important next and vital step once the apprenticeship route is established.
Thank you. Nathan.
Thank you, moderator. First, I want to thank the committee for my quick and early morning email submitting this motion. I have a growing church. It came with innovation, it came with strategy, it came with biblical adherence, it came with the gospel of Jesus Christ and a dependence on the Holy Spirit. For this, I am grateful. But it came with a strategy that was implemented by a group of people in my congregation who valued young people and realized that they are the future of the church, but they are also the church. And we must commend the people who are standing behind me, who have stood here all week listening to us do a number of things that maybe they weren't used to hearing, called discussion, maybe bureaucracy. I've heard that thrown out. But the reality is this, that we have an opportunity today. We have an opportunity to make a big difference. And that is in the reality that there will be an apprenticeship program prayerfully discussed and actually accepted today that will enable a route of ministry for young people. I am reminded that I am a bit older. On my 50th birthday, I went to the door to see my parishioners leave, and one of the families who were there were leaving into the darkness, the still darkness of the Scottish night, and I only heard one voice from a young girl who said, "Happy birthday, old man." Let me tell you something. We have an opportunity to invest in the future. And I want to thank the work that has taken shape within the forum and the belief that training matters. I initially had asked that we might examine the possibility of doing a youth minister post. I asked the same question from this spot 6 years ago, and we're not there yet. But I do believe that the work that is established through the forum today and through this motion will move us in a direction by which we resource and we fund and we believe again that the gospel changes lives. Our church has invested in a youth pastor. Why? Because we believe that he will make a difference in the life of young people. And I'm proud to say that last Sunday, a third of our congregation was under the age of 12, ready to hear the word of God and be discipled. We have a future, and we need to embrace it. And so I ask, and I'm thankful for the work that's already being done, and I do ask that you take this motion into consideration and you heartily agree to it. My seconder is Amos Chuachong, and I want to thank you.
Thank you. Yeah,
Logic.
not seeing anyone else wanting to speak, convener.
We are happy to accept. The apprenticeship model, as you will understand, we're at the very, very early stages. So this will be part of the discussion and the learning as we move forward. I also think in terms of Section B, or Section 2, the grant-making bodies of the church, I mean, Saturday, Seeds for Growth. So it's there, and, you know, I would encourage you to make use of that. Thank you.
Thank you, convener. Does the Assembly approve the new Section 15? And online? Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Nathan. And another new Section 15. Okay. And we have yet another new Section 15 in the name of Leslie Milton. Leslie, do you have a seconder?
Yes, I do.
And Principal Clark, would you please read the new Section 15, the second new Section 15?
Thank you, moderator. The motion in the name of Leslie Milton reads as follows. Instruct presbyteries in consultation with the Faith Nurture Forum to communicate via their clerks with all funeral directors which have offices within their bounds to request that any worship leader of the Church of Scotland who is being asked to conduct a funeral is always contacted by the funeral director before a date for such a service, whether provisional or firm is set.
Thank you. I didn't realise that the principal clerk would have a theme tune, which is Nobody Does It Better. In raising this issue, moderator, I want to begin by paying tribute to the pastoral sensitivity and the professionalism of funeral directors. Many of us in parish ministry have witnessed how funeral directors have had to cope with an increased workload and have provided their services with deep commitment to the people that they serve. I also want to stress that this issue does not grow out of any direct experience in my own current parish work, where I'm greatly helped by working with funeral directors who exercise the highest level of sensitivity to and respect for my own place in offering bereavement care and providing funeral services for families as a parish minister. This issue has been raised with me as the resourcing ministry convener of Lothian and Borders Presbytery. Along with most ministers and others providing funeral services in the Church of Scotland, I have, however, encountered the issues raised in this deliverance at first hand in my previous charge. Those of us who have been in ministry for some time will have noticed a change in culture surrounding the organisation of funerals. It is becoming increasingly common to receive a call from a funeral director which begins with words along the lines, "I wonder if you're free on Tuesday the 16th to do a funeral for us." Or a general conversation begins inquiring about one's availability, and 2 or 3 sentences in, it becomes clear that the time has already been booked and the funeral director is fitting you into plans that have already been made. Such an approach, I believe, is linked to the rise of civil celebrants and shows no understanding of the role of the parish minister or the kind of care that we offer, which is more than doing a service. When a minister or service leader is asked to fit in with pre-arranged plans, it is always distressing, but perhaps especially so when it concerns a church member, someone with whom you already have a relationship. You're left either bending over backwards to fit in with an arrangement that you would otherwise not have made, or creating disappointment and sometimes even anger because you have to refuse. Almost every minister or worship leader I know can tell of an instance when this practice has caused distress, either to themselves, to the family of a deceased person, or to the congregations we serve. In my own case, in my former charge, the one that comes most quickly to mind concerns receiving a call on my answering machine about the death of one of our members. That was at 2 in the afternoon, and when I called back later that same day, I was told the family have gone with another reverend. When I protested that this was not the way that our system worked, the receptionist told me the family just wanted to confirm the time we'd arranged. My hands were tied. I share this concern with the General Assembly. And the response that I have had from colleagues when mentioning that I'm going to bring this deliverance is that it is becoming increasingly prevalent and that they are grateful for it. It can be hard for individual service leaders to raise this issue with local firms because they feel the need to maintain respectful and collaborative relationships with people they regularly work with. A clear statement of our practice sent by Presbytery clerks to all funeral directors without anyone being singled out will provide reassurance to all of us who conduct funeral services. I hope that the General Assembly will be minded to support this deliverance, and if it is not for the Presbytery clerks who are here still to take note about the weight of concern that surrounds this. And my seconder is Reverend Norman Smith, who is the Presbytery Clerk of Lothian and Borders Presbytery. Thank you.
Thank you. We've got two people who would like to speak, and then we'll move to the convener. Ian Aiken and Craig Dobney.
Thank you, moderator. I was told that yesterday my microphone was very loud, so I hope I'm not blasting everybody this time round. Ian Aitken, 376. Moderator, I would like to resist this proposal. And whilst I sympathise with what Dr. Milton has said and with others who have had difficult relationships or difficult situations with local funeral directors, I do think that this is perhaps using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. I think on the one hand that with all that's going on to add yet more work, which it seems like quite a lot of work to presbytery clerks or those in presbytery to contact all the funeral directors in an area, that seems like adding unnecessary work. And I also fear that it may actually have the opposite effect to that intended by potentially damaging good relationships with the vast majority of funeral directors, which we have, whilst not really having any impact upon those few who might be more difficult. These are changing times, and perhaps we need to adapt with them. There are often reasons why a funeral director may have to set a date, either provisionally or firmly, before they can get hold of a minister. And indeed, that pressure may be coming from families, and that's something we're going to have to simply work with and find a way to work with. And so I would suggest that if there's a continuing problem with a particular funeral director being experienced by Church of Scotland and other funeral worship leaders, then it's local representation, possibly involving the presbytery if necessary, that needs to be made, and it should be directed towards the individual funeral director. A blanket instruction to contact all funeral directors, I fear, is far too heavy-handed and time-consuming. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you, Ian. Craig Dobney, and then we will go to the convener.
Moderator, Craig Dobney, 317, what he said.
Oh. Gold star. Leslie, you've got right to reply, and then I will hand on to the convener. Thank you, Leslie.
Very briefly, to answer Mr. Aiken's point, sometimes it's helpful to send something out that is for everyone so that no one is feeling singled out. And I think that is the intention of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Convener.
Thank you, moderator. I think, first of all, we would ask if you could remove the Faith Nurture Forum in consultation with the Faith Nurture Forum. I think we're superfluous in all of this. It's something for the presbyteries. I think also, whilst we're sympathetic, it is another piece of work for presbytery clerks. It may well be a sledgehammer to crack a nut. It may be something they would consider doing if there is a perceived local need. So I would leave it to the mind of the Assembly, but if we could remove the Faith Nurture Forum. Thank you. Thank you.
Do we have a seconder?
I accept that change. Thank you.
Okay.
It's not, yeah, we'll have to do it as an amendment to the motion.
Have to do it to an, yeah, have to be an amendment.
Or for time, could we just go, it'll just happen? Okay. We'll have to wait a few moments to get the amendment up on the screen.
We need to get, you'll have to bear with because we need to get the amendment on the screen and get the words in the proper order. words on the screen. Principal Clark.
Thank you, Moderator. We have an amendment to the motion in the name of the convener, and the amendment is amend the proposed new section 15 by removing the words in consultation with the Faith Nurture Forum.
The convener is happy to accept because it is hers after all. Is the Assembly happy to accept this amendment? We're just saying the amendment, then we go with either the amended or the regular one. We're not saying we're approving it. We're just making sure which one we're going to go with. Okay. Are we all clear? It's fine. Then okay. So we'll be dealing with a yes or a no in regards to the amended new section 15. Okay. Now, before we do that, I just want to make sure everybody's clear because there seemed to be some confusion.
Yeah. Okay. If I can, we haven't got it on the hub, but we have got it up on the screen up there. So we are now moving to vote on the amended section, new section 15. So it says instruct presbyteries to communicate via their clerks, having already agreed to remove the words in consultation with the Faith Nurture Forum.
And not wanting to make life more difficult, but I think let's go with an electronic vote. Then we're absolutely sure and we can move on. Michael.
Thank you, Moderator. Mayor 5, 6, 7. Those in the hall will vote using their keypads. Those online will utilise the Assembly Hub, making sure you click the red Current Live Debate button. If you are for the motion, you will press button 1. If you are against, you will press button 2. You will have 30 seconds. The vote starts now. Seconds remain. The vote is now closed.
For the amendment 141, against 188. The amendment, that new section 15 falls. Sorry. We have another new section 15 in the name of Robert Allen. And Robert, I'm going to go through the drill. Do you have a seconder?
Yeah, I believe so.
Thank you very much.
And Principal Clark, would you please read the new section?
Thank you. We have a new section 15 inserted and we'll renumber as we go along. The motion is agreed that the pulpit supply fee and the fee where congregations have to pay for funerals should be raised from £60 to £100 and any additional service raised from £30 to £50.
Thank you. Sorry.
Go for it.
Thank you, Robert Allen, 221. Moderator, when an organist kindly provides supply at my church, he or she gets paid the going rate of £80. Are we really saying that someone providing supply on a Sunday is only entitled to 60? Are we expecting the supply person to simply dip into the old barrel of sermons and prayers and turn up and deliver on a Sunday and pick up £60 for doing so? Or are we in this modern mission-minded church expecting the supply minister to put a great deal of thought and preparation into what we will deliver to inspire and encourage the congregation? And many around here will know the time and effort put into worship preparation. So I think it's time we raise the supply fee to a more realistic level. And I propose this new section, ask the Assembly to support it, send out the message to those who provide this service they are valued and appreciated.
Okay. Thank you. I see no one on the screen wanting to speak, so convener. Oh. Mike 82.
Anna Rodwell, I'm sorry, 65 again. You know, there's a saying, if you give a pig a pancake, she'll want syrup on it. And that seems to be me today, and I do apologise. And you might rule this out of order, but I like that motion. My question is, why is it fair that we are allowed to pay retired ministers or local ministers, but we are not allowed to pay members of our congregation? And this has been a huge issue in our presbytery, and we have brought it forward. And as far as I know, we've not received an answer. Why are we not allowed to pay our lay people?
Thank you. Convener, questions are always in order.
Our lay people can be paid expenses, as far as I'm aware, but not a supply fee. I think it all goes back to, you know, who it is who's providing the supply. And if it's someone from within your congregation, then that's really seen as their gift to the congregation. Whereas somebody who's coming in to provide pulpit supply, that's, that's the understanding I have of where we are at the moment. Okay. Moderator, we are happy to accept this, but I just want to make the point.
We've got, sorry, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. We've got a point of order. Stuart Irvin.
I am Irvin 179. I am not well versed enough to remember the standing order, but I do recall that earlier on in the week we're looking at standing order with regards to budget implications, and so perhaps we could have a bit of clarity here, because budgeting for pulpit supply cuts across different budgets, both at congregational level. So while that might not be in standing orders at the General Assembly, there is a principle there, but also when we are doing study leave or other such things, pulpit supply fees might be provided by the central church. So just to clarify what is the principle here, because I support what's been said here, but there is a large percentage increase, and so I think we should be clear on that with regards to standing orders.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Moderator. Thank you, Stuart, for raising an important question. You've just made our General Treasurer very happy that we're actually going to start remembering Standing Order 56. It is very difficult to apply Standing Order 56 because there's so many things that we're passing all of the time, and that's partly about how we do our business. And I have been in conversations already with the Assembly trustees about how we present budgets and finances to the General Assembly so that we're far clearer as to where we're going over budget and how we spend the money of the church. Basically, I had apologised to Anne earlier because I'm taking the view that it's not enforceable, but we are in a sticky wicket. And what will happen to the budgets, what the General Treasurer, and if this is right, Anne will keep me right if she's anywhere around. Oh, no, she's disappeared. Is that this will just have to mean that other work in what will be the Faith Action Programme leadership team, if this is passed, then other things will just not have to go down a priority list. So it will have a knock-on effect, but we have to be consistent because there's been so much, even in terms of just time. It's not even just money, it's time and money. So thank you for raising that. And we do need to face the reality that everything we make a decision on here has a financial implication. And I think we need, and I think we'd all agree, to find a more sophisticated way in which we can, as an Assembly, be informed in how we do our budgeting. But thank you. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Point of order. Yes. And can we have your name and number? Thank you.
Tara Granados, 178. I was just curious about the Assembly Hub. It seems that we are now to all the sections of new deliverances, and so all of the new sections have gone. If you refresh your page, I'm wondering if we can go back so that we can view the new sections ourselves and carefully review the language. Is that possible? So if you haven't refreshed your page, it's still there, but I refreshed my page and all it has is the very last one, which says the deliverance as a whole.
Moderator, may I?
Of course.
Tara, can I ask you to speak to Neil McLennan, and then we'll find out if it's a single problem or a wider problem, and we'll do... Oh, everybody's got it. Right, marvellous. Well, that's answered that. Over to you, Neil.
If those of you who can't find it on the report page will find it under Current Live Debate. The Current Live Debate is the fresh page where everything new arrives. So it's the red button, it's the answer to all your prayers. Pressing the Current Live Debate button will give you all the upcoming motions. No, not working? Yes? No, the ones that are passed are gone. We remove those to keep things tidy. So only the ones that are forthcoming remain. The ones that are passed will appear in the minutes.
Okay. Thank you, and I think that's the answer to is that all right with you, Tara? Thank you, that's the answer to the question. Convener.
Thank you, Moderator. This is something that we have talked about on the forum on a number of occasions, and the recognition is that this is a cost paid by congregations. Now, there are times when, yes, it's a national cost, and obviously there is therefore a budgetary implication, but it is a local cost. I'm very sympathetic. You know, yes, a relief organist will get paid more than a supply minister in my congregation. We're in a kind of messy situation because of the budgetary implication. But as a principle, I'm in support. We are in support.
Okay.
So we just absorb the budgetary implication.
Well, the Assembly will need to make that decision, so thank you.
Well, I think let's be pragmatic, shall we? We've been ignoring it in its really, if I'm being honest. I mean, we're not going to write that down, but we're being aware. Oh, I'm loving it. The Convener Assembly Trustees here. I want us to acknowledge that we are, even in terms of when we're looking at additional resources, in terms of human resources, and how we actually allocate what work people do. So everything that we're deciding has its implications. As the convener has just said, a lot of this goes to the congregation. It only is in relation where there's vacancy situations, but it's not a massive, this one's not a massive issue on the national budget. But I think we don't need to, if we start suspending standing order, we know it's a problem, is what my pragmatic suggestion. But you're the Assembly, and I'm your servant, you tell me. And I suggest we speak to the convener of the Assembly Trustees.
Brian Sherritt.
Dr. Sherritt, 53. I'm speaking regarding the £60 fee to £100. Now that I'm retired, I'm getting pulpit supply fees, and this £60 has remained the same for several years. And the treasurer of the last church that I did pulpit supply for thought that we should be receiving more. I don't know if it should be up to 100, say, but certainly there should be reviewing whether this should be the same, because every other thing in the church is increasing. Our pensions are increasing, everything else is increasing, but this pulpit supply fee has been kept for several years at £60. It used to go up regularly each year, but I mean, £60 to £100 is like the doctors asking to get this great big increase because they haven't had for a number of years. But I not necessarily agree that the £100 should be the amount or the 50, but I certainly think they should be reviewed from 60 maybe to 70 or something.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to go to David Cameron and then Donald McCorkindale.
David Cameron, 91. Thank you, Moderator. Okay. I'm not going to contradict the Principal Clerk at all. I agree entirely with her. She's articulated very well the implications of large budgetary increases. This might seem small in terms of providing additional pulpit supply in the local context, but where there is a vacancy, that then impacts on the locum costs which are paid through the central funds. I would suggest that we've heard what Mr Allen has brought to the Assembly. There may be some form of agreement that something locally needs to be done, but if the Faith Action Programme leadership team that will take this forward will have a look at it and bring a proposal to deal with the local situation without impacting too badly on the budget from the central situation, then I think that would be the way forward. And if we can give that guarantee, I think that solves the problem. Thank you, Moderator.
Okay. All right, but we've got, okay. Now, I'm going to say this is important, but we are also at 20 minutes to 3 in the afternoon, and we are still on the Faith Nurture Forum report. So I would ask the Assembly to think long and hard about wanting to speak. If you've already heard a particular point, I think that hearing it once is probably enough.
Moderator McCorkindale 568. I am never one to go back to, this is how we always used to do it, but I have been around this church long enough to remember that when I was a student, a long time ago, pulpit supply fees were set at a 300th of the stipend of the minister that you were filling in for. I've done the maths, and it comes out at a little over what is being proposed. A labourer is surely worthy of hire. I make that point.
Okay, I'm of a mind to hear from. Okay, I'm of a mind to hear from the convener. I think we've heard a good balanced discussion.
I mean, we've heard all the arguments. So there is a local impact, there will be a national impact. I think just to tie this down, we'd like to put a date on it, a start date, 1st of January 2024. And then just that gives us time to be prepared.
Okay, that would be an amendment.
That's another amendment.
That's another amendment.
Woohoo! No. Or do we really need a start date? Do we just...
If we're going to go for it, let's just let it.
Just, okay.
It would be to put a date on it.
Are we putting...
Just put it to the Assembly. They've heard all the arguments.
All right, we're going to put this to the Assembly, and we're going to do this by an electronic vote to make sure that we get it in a oneer. So, Michael.
Thank you, Moderator. Mayor 567. We are going to be voting on whether to accept the new Section 15 by Bluetooth handsets in the hall or by pressing the current live debate button in the Assembly Hub if you're online, so that the buttons for and against appear. Button 1 is for, button 2 is against. You will have 30 seconds and the voting starts now. Ten seconds remain. The vote is now closed.
In the new section 15 for 273, against 70. The new section 15 passes. Okay. Brace yourselves, Assembly. There is another new section 15. Two more new section 15s, and then we move to 16. I don't think we'll ever be so glad to move to a new number.
There's no 16.
There's no. I got ahead of myself. Then we're done. This is very exciting. So we've got a new section 15, and it's Lorna Tunstall. Lorna. And do you have a seconder?
Seconded. I believe I do.
And don't shoot the messenger, but we need to read it. Principal Clark.
It's a longing.
Thank you, moderator.
You're welcome.
Okay, this is the motion in the name of Lorna Tunstall. It's a new number 15, it'll be renumbered. In the light of the creativity shown by presbyteries in the development and implementation of presbytery mission plans and the increasing variety of part-time ministries being designed in different contexts, pass regulations amending the regulations for remuneration and reimbursement of parish ministers as follows. So this will be a new amending regulation. Regulations amending the regulations for remuneration and reimbursement of parish ministries, Regulations 2015 Edinburgh. And then it'll obviously, if you pass it, it'll be change the name numbers, it'll be May 2023. And this is the change. The General Assembly hereby enact and ordain that the regulations for remuneration and reimbursement of parish ministers, Regulations 1/2015, shall be amended as follows. 1. In the schedule, Part 2, delete the 5th bullet point, i.e. delete all part-time parish ministers are expected to conduct Sunday services as part of the duties of their office in the same way as full-time ministers. There is therefore no difference in the number of Sundays in any calendar year on which pulpit supply is to be paid, open brackets, 7 Sundays, close brackets, and confirm that it is for presbyteries in the drafting of bases of adjustments to determine the frequency of conduct of worship by any part-time minister. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you.
Oh, yes, it is seconded.
Lorna.
Moderator Lorna Tunstall, 466. The motion is lengthy. My words are not, I can assure you. I'd like to thank the convener and the Committee of the Faith and Nurture Forum for the report. I have put forward the following motion for a new deliverance, and I would just like to say that I personally have no vested gain or actual interest for myself from this request. I am a minister on full-time tenure, but I have had the unenviable task of acting as a planning convener for our presbytery over the past 10 months. Within our mission plan, we, as indeed have countless other presbyteries, have had to be creative with the reduced allocation of full-time equivalent ministries to ensure, as ratified yesterday, that we maintain the parish coverage of ministry within such large geographical areas. Part-time 50% FTE posts have now become a necessity. But if we are to expect, as per Part 2 of this schedule of regulations, that those part-time ministers are mandated to preach every week, then it's going to be very difficult to fill these vacant positions. And it will leave very little extra time for these ministers to engage in mission and outreach out with regular services, which is, of course, what we all want to get back to doing. Moderator, I would propose that we simply remove this requirement within the regulations and leave it up for individual presbyteries and nominating committees to set out the frequency of preaching rotas. And if it helps, I do have the agreement of the next convener of legal questions for this motion.
Thank you. There are no other people asking to speak.
Moderator, we are happy to accept this. We recognise that we do have to become more flexible. And I would just say, obviously, depending on what agreement is reached about the number of Sundays and how that fits into an overall pattern of deployment, there may be additional pulpit supply costs then for a congregation. So just to make that, let the Assembly be aware of that. And I think it would be really important that, yes, a detailed agreement is drawn up to ensure that everybody understands just exactly what is expected of this part-time minister working however many Sundays in the year. But it gives us a flexibility, so we are happy to accept. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, convener. The convener is happy to accept. Is the Assembly happy to accept? Thank you. And online. Thank you. And we have our final new section 15 in the name of Elizabeth Gibson. In the name of Elizabeth Gibson. Oh, there you are, Elizabeth. And Elizabeth, do you have a seconder?
I do. Yep.
Great. And Principal Clark? Oh, could you please give your name and number,
Yep.
Elizabeth? Sorry.
Liz Gibson, 270.
Okay. And Principal Clark, could you
Thank
please read
you,
this?
moderator. Insert as a new section 15 and renumber, noting that the General Assembly has backed the call for frontline social care workers to be paid a minimum of £12 an hour, instruct the Faith Action Programme leadership team to review the pay and conditions of those who serve as locums, giving consideration to the provision of written employment contracts and report to the General Assembly of 2024.
Thank you, moderator.
Elizabeth.
Some are content with the present arrangements for locums, others are not. I have had conversations with both, and there are many different circumstances. I have now been a parish minister again for 2 years. I vowed that I wouldn't stop trying to change the way locums are treated when it no longer applied to me personally. When I moved to Mull in 2013, demitting my previous charge to do ministry differently, I was grateful for the opportunity to be locum as well as interim moderator 1 day a week on the neighbouring island of Colonsey, which was under guardianship. As that involved 2 ferry journeys totalling nearly 4 hours, if all goes smoothly, it works by me going for 6 to 8 weeks a year, only one being in a summer month, being available by phone and email in between. I was as much their parish minister as anyone else has been in recent years. In fact, they saw more of me than most islands linked with mainland parishes see of their parish ministers. I was also locum and sometimes interim moderator of Iona, Kilfinnicon, Kilvacuan and the Ross of Mull until a parish minister was called. Support and appreciation from the churches and wider communities wherever I have served was second to none. I resigned from Colonsey for both positive and negative reasons. The negative was that in practical terms, the institution of the church treats locums with disdain. When other ministries' pay increased, locums did not change. Pulpit supply went up a bit, but not the rate for pastoral work. It was then £70 per day. I think it's now slightly up, but still working out at not much more than the current minimum wage of £10.42 per hour. If I had been off sick or had had an accident, even after 5 years of continuous service, my already low pay would have stopped immediately. I felt it was wrong to stay on and get more aggrieved. I tried to be positive in my ministry, and this was really getting to me. I took on a couple of days' seasonal driving job that paid about the same and continued my other different ministry. I thought I would never take on being a locum again, although I would continue doing regular pulpit supply. That was January 2019. In May 2019, my good friend and our then parish minister died in an accident. Of course, when asked, I stepped up. Who wouldn't in such awful circumstances? I hoped to get a part-time, proper, pro-rata, temporary contract, but was told this was impossible. Ministries' Council was as helpful as they could be within the imposed constraints. I still don't see why such things are apparently impossible in the church when they are used extensively elsewhere. In March 2020, I was surprised and touched to be given one of the limited number of bottles of hand sanitizer being distributed locally to frontline workers. The local community and church were very affirming, but the national church were not. I don't want to rehash that. I do know full-time ministers spoke up, leading to improved understanding and support. I had a funeral every other week through lockdown and beyond. Fortunately, only one COVID-related, but still, if I'd succumbed to that or anything else, my pay would have been stopped. How to make an already stressful time worse. The same standards of care and leading of worship is rightly expected of locums as anyone else. I never thought I would be called to parish ministry again, but in May 2021 that happened, and I moved a few miles up the road to the manse. I continue to strongly believe that we should treat everyone who works for the church as we would expect to be treated ourselves. Love our neighbours as ourselves. I'm asking for review. Flexibility may be the answer. It will remain to be seen what actually happens. Please support this motion. Thank you, Moderator.
Thank you. Seeing no one on my screen who wishes to speak, convener.
Thank you, and we are happy to accept. Or I should say, the Faith Action Leadership Programme team are happy to accept. So thank you.
Super. Thank you very much. Is the Assembly happy to accept the final new 15? And online. Wonderful. Now, we did say that if there was anything, if there was anything that somebody had wanted to say, that before we took the deliverance as a whole, if that was something they wanted to do, we would offer them the opportunity. There are 2 names up. Brave people. Brave people. Okay. I've got 2 names up first, so we'll go with them. Craig Dobney and Jonathan Fleming, and then Robert Allen, and then we are going to take the deliverance as a whole.
Moderator, Craig Dobney, 317. We've heard a lot this afternoon and this morning about the stresses and strains of ministry. And I think that is right that we've heard all of these points this morning. I would personally like to thank the Faith Nurture Forum for the amazing help they gave me through a very difficult bereavement time at the start of this year. Your staff were absolutely fantastic, and I really appreciated the help I got through that, convener. There's a lot of help for ministers in the Church of Scotland I've found personally. But I think we also have to acknowledge the extreme strain and stress on our session clerks at the moment, on our elders, on our leadership teams and our youth leaders, on all aspects of our church ministry. And I'm not quite sure we've got the support in place for that, but I think a lot of that support lies here with us as leaders of our churches. And I think it's a timely reminder that as we are being so well looked after, we need to be looking after our session clerks, our elders, and everybody else involved as well, because they're going through such stressful times as well. For example, one thing we did recently in our parish was to take our session away on retreat. And that was fantastic, and it was a great day. So I would encourage you all to think about just how you can look after your session clerks, your elders, your youth leaders, and all these people in our teams. Thank you, Moderator.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you for that. Jonathan Fleming, and then finally Robert Allen. Jonathan, you're on. Could you give us your name and number?
Yes, of course, Moderator. Jonathan Fleming, 141. Thank you for the opportunity to ask a question to the convener. We've heard a lot today about clergy wellbeing in light of the implications of the Presbytery mission planning process. I speak as an interim planning convener for the Presbytery of Clyde. And one of the things that a lot of clergy have expressed concern about is the fact that in light of the growing demands on ministry and ministries of the church, there is a need for many of us to upskill and to have time to be able to do that. But not only that, to have an opportunity not to use things like study leave as an opportunity to be able to re-energize or refresh or to have their calling reignited, but to perhaps explore the possibility of discussing the theme of sabbaticals once again. I know this is something that's been asked in previous General Assemblies, but I think this is more essential than ever. I'm not going to propose a deliverance because I know we've had enough work applied onto the Faith Nurture Forum, and I know there's a lot of work to do, but could I have an assurance that the idea of sabbaticals would be reconsidered and maybe brought to a future General Assembly for consideration? Thank you, Moderator.
Thank you, Jonathan. Convener.
Moderator, I can give that assurance on behalf of a team I will not be a part of, but I am assured by those gathered here that we have heard and we will take action. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. Robert Allen, and then we will take the deliverance as a whole.
Thank you, Moderator. Robert Allen, 221. Hopefully a nice question for the convener to finish with. In the political style of asking a question in Parliament of one's own party, can I ask the convener, is it not exciting and heartening to see Sanctuary First, that wonderful, pioneering, groundbreaking, online Christian outreach presence as part of the Church's new way ahead? And can we commend the very Reverend Albert Bogle for the amazing work that he and his team have done thus far?
It's a very simple yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. Okay. And the deliverance as a whole. And online. Well done. Rosie. What a lot of change you have guided us through. Convening the Ministries Council, leading them through their evolution into the Faith Nurture Forum. And if that wasn't enough to be getting on with, you did this in the midst of a global pandemic when we couldn't see each other face to face, so needed to think outside the box, and you found ways to do just that. So many challenges bringing change, and you were there for people all the way through it. All the way through it. You also served 3 different parishes, and you were the clerk to the Presbytery of Kirkcaldy. Goodness sake.
No, that was beforehand.
Was it?
That was before.
All right. Just the one. All right. I have to say, though, I'm tired just relaying this to the Assembly. But that experience kept your convenership grounded in church community life and that insightful perspective. And for all of that, the General Assembly thanks you. Go well into that new chapter, Rosie. Thank you.